My best friend thinks I missed his wedding for no reason. But the truth would have destroyed him. I've gone back and forth about whether to write this for a long time because honestly, it still eats at me. It's been almost a year since my best friend got married, and he still doesn't know why I didn't show up. I told him it was because of a family emergency, which technically wasn't a lie. But the real story is a lot messier. I 28M grew up with Matt 29M, we met in middle school, bonded over video games and being the two awkward tall guys in our grade. We went through everything together. Bad relationships, college rejections, losing grandparents, moving across the country for work. If you saw one of us, the other wasn't far behind. When Matt started dating Kayla 27F, I was genuinely happy for him. She was confident, funny, beautiful. The kind of woman who could light up a room, I remember thinking. Finally, he found someone who gets him. The first year they dated, I hung out with them constantly. I was the third wheel, but it never felt that way. Kayla used to joke that she was dating both of us because of how close we were. But over time, something started to change. It started small. A look, a longer than necessary conversation, a text that felt off. Kayla and I started talking privately here and there, mostly about Matt. Stuff like what to get him for his birthday, or how to surprise him when he got promoted. It was harmless, or so I told myself. Then one night, we all went out for drinks to celebrate Matt's birthday. He got hammered early, like blackout-level drunk, and Kayla offered to drive him home. I went with them because I lived nearby. When we got him into bed, Kayla asked if I wanted a drink before I walked home. I should have said no. We sat in the kitchen, both of us a little tipsy, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. She started talking about how scared she was to commit, how she felt like she wasn't enough for Matt, how sometimes she wondered if he loved her the same way she loved him. And then she kissed me. It was quick, one of those impulsive, heat-of-the-moment things, but it stopped my heart cold. I pulled away immediately, stammered something like, "Kayla, we can't do that," and she looked mortified. She said she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, that she'd had too much to drink. I left. I didn't tell Matt, I didn't tell anyone. I told myself it was a mistake, that bringing it up would only blow up everything. But things didn't go back to normal. Kayla started acting weird. She'd be overly affectionate around Matt when I was there. Like she was trying to prove something. She'd avoid eye contact with me completely. Every time Matt said something about how Kayla's the best thing that ever happened to me, I'd feel sick to my stomach. Then, a few months later, Matt told me he was going to propose. I remember sitting in his apartment while he showed me the ring he picked out. It was simple but elegant, exactly Kayla's taste. My stomach dropped. I thought about telling him right then. I even opened my mouth to say something, but I froze. How could I tell my best friend that his fiancée kissed me? That she crossed a line but I didn't stop it fast enough? That she'd been lying to him, even if just for one stupid moment? He looked so happy, the happiest I'd ever seen him. And I couldn't do it. I told myself it wasn't my place. That maybe it really had been a one-time mistake. That if she really loved him, she wouldn't do it again, so I said nothing. They got engaged, and suddenly, I was his best man. I wanted to feel proud, but instead, I felt like a fraud. Every toast, every wedding plan. Every time I stood next to him while he called himself the luckiest man alive, I felt like I was hiding a grenade under my tongue. 2 weeks before the wedding, I ran into Kayla at a coffee shop. We hadn't spoken alone since that night. She looked terrified when she saw me. We exchanged awkward hellos, and then she asked if we could talk. She said, "Please don't tell him. It would ruin everything." I remember just staring at her, completely numb. I asked if she'd told him about the kiss. She said no, that she'd wanted to, but it would destroy him, and she regretted it more than anything she'd ever done. She said, "You're his best friend. You know how much he needs this wedding to go right." That was the moment I realized what kind of person she really was. It wasn't about Matt, it was about control. She wasn't afraid of hurting him. She was afraid of losing him. I went home and sat in my car for an hour, trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. Tell him and ruin everything? Stay silent and live with the guilt? I didn't sleep for days. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I made up my mind. I packed a bag, texted Matt that something came up with my mom who was sick at the time, though not critically, and that I couldn't make it to the wedding. He called me immediately, confused and upset. I told him I was sorry, that I couldn't leave, that I'd explain later. He said, "You're my best man. I need you here," and I said, "I know, man. I'm so sorry." Then I hung up before he could ask anything else. The next morning, I turned off my phone. I didn't watch the live stream, didn't look at photos, I couldn't. I spent the day walking through my old neighborhood, trying not to think about what was happening. I told myself I was doing it for him, that it was better he didn't know, that my absence would sting less than the truth. But when I finally turned my phone back on the next day, I had 27 missed calls and a dozen texts from him. Please call me. Where are you? I don't understand. I thought you were my brother. I didn't answer. Not then. Not for a long time. We didn't talk for nearly 6 months after that. When we finally did, he was cold, distant. He said he forgave me but didn't understand. He assumed I'd just bailed because I couldn't handle seeing him get married first, that maybe I was jealous, and I let him think that. Because the alternative, telling him that his wife cheated before the wedding, even just with a kiss, would have shattered him. But lately, I've started to wonder if I made the wrong call. He and Kayla have been married a year now. He talks about her like she's perfect. They post couple selfies every weekend, go on road trips, have date nights. I want to believe she changed, that it really was just one mistake. But every time I see their photos, all I can think about is that night in the kitchen, and the lie that sits between them, and between us. And sometimes, when Matt calls me brother, I feel like I don't deserve it anymore. He doesn't know that the real reason I missed his wedding wasn't because of a family emergency. It was because I couldn't stand there next to him, pretending everything was perfect when I knew it wasn't. I'm haunted by the idea that maybe he'll find out someday, that something will slip, or Kayla will confess, and he'll realize I knew all along, and I'll lose him for real this time. I keep asking myself, was protecting him worth the guilt that's been eating me alive ever since? Because now, every time I see a wedding photo of them smiling, all I see is the lie I helped build, and the truth I buried with it. It's been 6 months since I wrote that post. I never expected to be back here, but something happened that completely changed everything. It started with a message. I was at work, half asleep and sipping bad coffee when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Matt. We hadn't spoken in a while. Our friendship had turned into this awkward, surface-level thing where we texted a couple times a month about football or random memes. But the closeness was gone. The message said, "Hey man, can we talk tonight? It's important." My stomach dropped. I asked if everything was okay, but he didn't answer. Just sent me a thumbs-up emoji. That night, when he called, his voice was shaky, not angry, not cold, just broken. He said, "I found out something, and I need you to tell me the truth." I froze. It felt like my heart stopped mid-beat. He continued, "Did something ever happen between you and Kayla?" It was like every sound in the world disappeared for a second. I tried to breathe, but it felt like my chest was caving in. I asked what made him ask that, but he didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "She told me. Apparently they'd had a massive fight. He'd found some old messages on her iPad from years ago, from the time before their wedding, and one of them was from me. It wasn't anything incriminating, just me saying, let's not make things more awkward than they already are." He'd asked her what that meant, and after hours of going back and forth, she finally broke down and told him about the kiss. She told him I didn't start it, that it was her, that she regretted it. But she also told him I never told him the truth, that I lied. That part hurt the most, he said. "You were my brother, man. You were the one person I trusted more than anyone, and you let me marry her without saying a word." I tried to explain that I didn't want to destroy him, that I thought keeping it quiet was the best way to protect him. But even as I said it, it sounded hollow. He said, "You didn't protect me. You protected yourself. You didn't want to be the bad guy." He wasn't yelling. That almost made it worse. There was a long silence. Then he said quietly, "I can't look at either of you right now. I don't even know who my friends are anymore," and he hung up. That night, I barely slept. I felt every ounce of guilt I'd buried over the past year surge up all at once. I wanted to drive to his house, to beg him to hear me out, but I knew it wouldn't help. The next day I got a call from Kayla. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, or maybe anger, got the better of me. She said, "He left. He went to stay with his brother for a while." Her voice cracked, and for a second, I felt sorry for her. Then she said something that made me see red. "He was going to find out eventually. I just figured it'd be better if it came from me," I told her. "No, you didn't do it, to be honest. You did it because you were scared he'd find out without you controlling the story." She didn't deny it. She just sighed and said, "I guess we both messed up." I hung up on her. For weeks after that, I didn't hear from either of them. I tried texting Matt a few times. Nothing heavy, Just hope you're okay or thinking about you. He never responded. Then one night in December, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. No address, no stamp. Just my name written in handwriting I recognized instantly. It was from Matt. Inside was a single page. No dear, no sincerely. Just words. Short, blunt, painful. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive either of you. You were my brother, and she was supposed to be my partner. You both broke something I can't fix. But I don't hate you. I just need distance. For a long time, I sat on my couch reading that note over and over until the ink smudged under my fingers. He wasn't angry. Not really. Just done. That was somehow worse, since then. I've learned that they separated, she moved out about a month ago. They're not officially divorced yet. But it's heading that way. From what mutual friends say, he's been staying with his brother and barely talks to anyone. I saw him once since all this happened. At a mutual friend's engagement party a few weeks ago. He looked thinner, older somehow. When our eyes met across the room, he hesitated, then gave me a small nod. Not friendly, not hateful, just acknowledgement. I wanted to go talk to him, to say something, but I couldn't find the right words. Later that night, as he was leaving, he stopped next to me for a moment. He didn't look at me, just said quietly, "Next time, don't protect me from the truth. I can handle pain better than betrayal." Then he walked away. And that's the last thing he said to me. I don't know if we'll ever be friends again. I want to believe time will heal things, but honestly, I'm not sure. Every day I replay it all, the kiss, the lie, the decision to stay silent. And I realize how one tiny moment can spiral into something catastrophic. I didn't just lose my best friend. I lost the version of myself that believed I was doing the right thing. Now, I just live with it. That hollow kind of guilt that doesn't fade. It just gets quieter until something reminds you, and it all comes roaring back. And sometimes, late at night, I think about that phone call. His voice breaking when he said, "You were my brother." Because no matter what happens next, I know he was right, I didn't protect him. I just failed him differently. Final update. It's been 4 years since everything happened. And I never thought I'd be back here writing this. But something happened recently that made me realize how life circles back. Even when you think you've closed every door, a few months ago, I was at a coffee shop near my office, a place I never usually go to. But my usual spot was packed. I was waiting for my drink, half distracted on my phone, when I heard someone behind me say, "Ethan?" It was Matt. For a second I thought I imagined it. But when I turned around, there he was. Older. Tired but smiling, not the forced, polite kind of smile you give someone you don't want to talk to, but the kind that says, "Hey, maybe I'm ready now." My heart was pounding. I managed to say, "Hey man," which sounded stupid and too small for everything that had passed between us. He gestured toward an empty table. "You got a minute?" We sat. The first few minutes were awkward, like two people who'd once known each other's entire lives but were suddenly strangers again. Then, slowly, it started to feel natural, familiar even. He told me about his life after the split. He moved to Seattle for a while, lived with his brother, went back to school part-time for business management, and recently got promoted to regional operations manager for his company. He said he's been back in town about 6 months. I asked how he was really doing, and he gave this small, quiet smile. Better than I thought I'd be. Took a long time to get there. Though, then he said something that made my stomach twist. Kayla reached out last year. He looked down at his coffee, then said, "She wanted to apologize again. We met once, it wasn't dramatic, just closure, I guess. She's living in Colorado now. Got remarried a few months ago. I didn't know how to react. All I could say was, 'That's good. I'm glad she found some peace.'" He nodded, then looked at me. "You look surprised." I laughed a little and said, "No, just didn't think I'd ever hear her name again." There was a long pause before he finally said, "I read your message." I froze. I'd sent him an email years ago, one I agonized over. Rewriting it a dozen times before sending it, I poured everything into that message. The guilt, the explanation, the regret. He never responded, and I assumed he'd deleted it. He said, "It took me a long time to open it, but when I did, I could tell you meant every word." Then, after a long silence, he added, "I forgive you." Just like that. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my hands. I tried to say thank you, but the words wouldn't come out. He leaned back in his chair and said, "You were right about one thing. You thought telling me would destroy me. Back then, it probably would have, but hiding it destroyed something else still. We were kids. We thought we knew what protecting people meant. We didn't. We talked for over 2 hours that day. About old memories, mutual friends, life, and everything that had happened in between. It wasn't like nothing had changed. Everything had. But somehow, the weight between us felt lighter. When we got up to leave, he said, "You know, I used to think forgiveness meant pretending it never happened. Now I think it just means it doesn't control me anymore." We stood there for a minute before he added, "You should come by sometime. The guys would like to see you." I nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how a single moment, that stupid, impulsive kiss years ago, had set off a chain reaction that blew up 3 lives. But sitting across from him that day, I realized something I hadn't before. We'd both grown up from it. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo what happened. But it gave it meaning. A few weeks later, we actually hung out again, grabbed beers with a few mutual friends. It wasn't like old times, not exactly. But there were flashes of it. The laughter, the teasing, the comfortable familiarity at one point, as everyone was talking. Matt looked over at me and said quietly, "Feels weird, right? Like picking up a book you thought you'd finished?" I said. "Yeah, but maybe we just skipped a few chapters." He laughed. "Maybe." Since then, we've been slowly rebuilding. Not the same friendship we had before, but something different. Wiser, real. We text now, meet up occasionally, even joke about things that used to feel impossible to mention. There's a scar there, but it's no longer an open wound. And sometimes, when I think back on everything, the guilt, the silence, the lost years, I realize that some friendships aren't meant to stay perfect. They're meant to break, change, and find their way back in a new form. I'll never forget what I did. I don't want to. It reminds me what honesty actually costs when you choose to withhold it. But I also learned that forgiveness isn't something you earn once. It's something you live up to. Every time you show up differently, every time you take responsibility without running from it. Last week he sent me a picture. Him holding his newborn niece, smiling wider than I'd seen in years. The caption just said, "Life's good." Man, and for the first time in a long time I believed him. Stories number 2. I found my daughter's panties in my husband's closet and jumped to the worst conclusion. I don't know how to come back from what I accused him of. I don't even know where to begin. I've been sitting in my car for the past hour, trying to figure out how to process what just happened. My hands are still shaking while I write this, and my stomach feels like it's been tied in a knot since last night. So, background, I've been married to Ryan for 10 years. We have one daughter, Lily, who's 8. Ryan and I met in college, got married a few years later, and we've built what I thought was a solid, ordinary life. We've had rough patches like any couple, finances, work stress, parenting disagreements, but I've always trusted him completely. That trust was the one thing I never questioned, until now. Yesterday afternoon, I was putting away laundry. Ryan had left early for work, and Lily was at a friend's house for a playdate. I was in our bedroom, folding clothes, when I noticed one of his closet drawers was slightly open. I figured it was one of those didn't push it in all the way things and went to close it. When I pulled it out to fix the corner of a shirt caught in the edge, I saw something that didn't belong there. A small piece of fabric, bright pink, folded under one of his t-shirts. I pulled it out, thinking maybe it was a washcloth or something Lily had dropped while playing hide-and-seek. But when I looked closer, my blood ran cold. It was a pair of little girl's panties, Lily's. They were from a pack I'd just bought her a few weeks ago. I recognized the butterfly print immediately. My heart started pounding so hard that I could barely breathe. I remember just standing there, holding them, staring at the floor. My brain went straight to the darkest place imaginable, and I couldn't stop it. My first thought wasn't rational or measured. It was horror. All I could think was, why are these in his drawer? I dropped them like they were on fire and backed out of the closet. I was nauseated, dizzy, trembling. My thoughts were all over the place. Did I misunderstand? Could there be another explanation? What if there isn't? I sat on the bed, crying so hard I could barely see. For a good 15 minutes I couldn't move. Then panic took over. I took photos of the panties, the drawer, the way I found them, because I didn't know what else to do. My mind was racing with worst-case scenarios. When Ryan got home that evening, I confronted him immediately. My voice was shaking, and I could barely form words. I just held them up and said, "Why were Lily's underwear in your closet?" The look on his face, I'll never forget it. He went completely pale. Then he looked at me, confused at first, then terrified. He asked me what I was talking about. I told him I found them, and he must have seen the fear and accusation on my face because he looked broken. He swore up and down that he had no idea what I was talking about. He kept saying, "Why would I ever have those? What are you saying?" He looked shocked, like I'd just accused him of something unthinkable. I lost it. I started yelling, crying, demanding answers. He just kept shaking his head, insisting he hadn't done anything. He said maybe they got mixed in with his laundry somehow. That made no sense to me. How would Lily's panties end up folded under his shirts? He sat down on the floor and started crying too. I've only seen him cry twice in our entire marriage. He said, "Do you really think I would hurt her? That I would ever—" And he couldn't even finish the sentence. It was like watching the ground collapse under both of us. I told him I couldn't believe anything until I had answers, and I left. I packed a bag for me and Lily and went to stay at my sister Megan's house. Ryan didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, silent, staring at the floor. I didn't sleep at all last night. Megan tried to calm me down, told me I should go to the police if I truly believed something had happened. But I didn't even know what I believed. Everything felt unreal. This morning I took Lily to school like normal, acting as if everything was fine. She was bubbly and cheerful, totally normal. That broke me. She didn't seem scared or uncomfortable around Ryan at all. If something awful had happened, wouldn't there be signs? After I dropped her off, I sat in the parking lot for almost an hour, crying. Then I drove home. I told myself I was going to grab more clothes and leave again, but when I walked into the house, Ryan was there. He looked wrecked. He hadn't shaved or eaten. He just said, "Please, you need to hear me out." He took me to the bedroom and showed me something I hadn't noticed. A small plastic storage bin behind his closet drawers. Inside were a few random things. A couple of Lily's old hair clips, some crayons, one of her socks. He said, "She likes hiding stuff in here." I didn't even notice until last week when I found her stuffed bunny in my briefcase. Then he opened the bottom drawer again. And sure enough, there was a little gap at the back where a kid's hand could easily push something through. It hit me all at once. Lily has been playing hide and seek with her stuff lately. She loves sneaking her toys and clothes into weird spots for us to find. She calls them treasure traps. I even found a Barbie shoe in the silverware drawer last month. I just fell apart. The guilt hit me like a truck. I accused my husband of something unspeakable because I didn't stop to think. Because my brain jumped straight to horror instead of logic. Ryan didn't yell. He didn't get angry. He just said quietly, "I get it. I know what it looked like." Then he started crying again. I tried to apologize, but what do you even say after something like that? We spent the rest of the day talking. He told me he understood why I reacted the way I did, but he also said he didn't know if he could forget it. The look on my face when I thought he was capable of that. Now, 2 days later, things are tense but calm. I'm back home, and Lily doesn't know anything happened. We haven't told her. Ryan and I are going to start counseling, because even though the misunderstanding was innocent, the damage it caused to our trust is huge. I keep replaying it over and over in my head. How easily fear can twist love into suspicion. How 1 second of doubt can unravel a decade of certainty. I know people say trust your gut, but sometimes your gut is wrong. Sometimes fear looks a lot like instinct. And when you've heard too many stories of awful things happening to kids, it's easy to imagine the worst before considering the mundane truth. I hate that I thought that way about the man I married. I hate that I let panic override reason. But I also understand now how fragile trust can be, and how much effort it takes to rebuild it once it cracks. I'm not writing this for advice. I just needed to get it out. Because last night, after Lily went to bed, I caught Ryan sitting on the couch, holding one of her stuffed animals, just staring into space. When he saw me, he tried to smile, but his eyes looked hollow. He whispered, "I'd never hurt her, you know that, right?" And I do, I really, truly do. But I also know that even when the truth clears you, the scar of being doubted doesn't fade easily. I don't know if our marriage will ever feel exactly the same again, but I'm determined to try. It's been about 6 months since everything happened, and I'm finally starting to breathe again without feeling like I'm walking on glass. I told myself I wasn't going to post again, but lately I've been doing a lot of reflecting, and it feels right to write it out. Not because I need advice, but because I need to remember what healing actually looks like when it's slow, messy, and real. The first few weeks after that night were hell. Even after I realized the truth, even after Ryan forgave me, something between us had cracked. We weren't fighting exactly, but there was this thick silence hanging in every room of the house. The kind of silence that has weight. Ryan tried to act normal, but I could see how guarded he was when I reached for him. He'd hesitate before hugging me back. Not in a mean way, just cautious. I think he was afraid I'd never truly see him the same again, even if I said I did. And honestly, for a while he was right. Every time I opened his closet, my heart would still stutter for a split second. We started couples therapy with Dr. Cole, a local counselor recommended by my sister, Megan. The first session was brutal. I cried through most of it, and Ryan barely spoke. When he finally did, he said something that's been burned into my brain ever since. I know she was scared. I know she panicked. But when the person you love looks at you like you're a monster, something inside you dies. Hearing that gutted me. I wanted to reach out and fix it, to take it back. But you can't erase that kind of wound with an apology. You just have to live through the process of proving it wrong. Over time, we started unpacking things that went deeper than the misunderstanding. Turns out, both of us had been carrying silent fears for a while. I learned that Ryan had felt like I'd been distant since Lily was born. Always prioritizing her, which, yes, is normal for a mother, but I hadn't realized how invisible he'd felt. I told him how much pressure I'd been under as the default parent, how terrified I was of anything happening to Lily, how the constant barrage of awful news stories about predators had made me hypervigilant. It wasn't about one pair of panties. It was about years of quiet fear and lack of communication building up until something snapped. Dr. Cole gave us small exercises. We started doing truth sessions, just 10 minutes before bed, phones off, no interruptions, where we'd tell each other one thing we were afraid of. It started awkwardly. I admitted that sometimes I still felt guilty being alone with him, which broke his heart to hear but opened a door. He admitted that he sometimes feared I stayed married to him out of guilt, not love, week by week. The space between us got a little smaller. Lily, of course, had no idea what had really happened, but she did start noticing the tension. One night, she said, "Mommy, you and Daddy don't laugh as much anymore." That crushed both of us. So we made an effort to rebuild normalcy for her. Family movie nights, weekend pancakes, backyard camping. Then something unexpectedly healing happened. One Saturday morning, Lily came running into the kitchen holding a sock she'd fished out of Ryan's shoe. She yelled, "Daddy, I found one of my treasures." We both froze. Ryan's eyes met mine, and then, for the first time in months, we both laughed. Real laughter. The kind that aches your stomach and feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. It sounds small, but that moment changed everything. It was the first time since the incident that I saw him smile without sadness behind it. That night, after Lily went to bed, Ryan sat next to me and said, "I think I'm ready to stop being angry." I just nodded and started crying again, because I didn't realize how much I'd been waiting to hear that. He still has triggers. If I move suddenly while we're talking about something heavy, I can see the flash of fear. That maybe I'll accuse him of something again, and I still have moments where the image of that day flickers through my mind, uninvited, but those moments are fewer and farther between. We've even started to joke about it now, gently, in that way couples do once the wound starts turning into a scar. A few weeks ago, I teased him about his mystery sock drawer, and he smirked. At least it's not contraband this time. It sounds dark, but humor has been part of our healing. Our therapist said something during our last session that stuck with me. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding that the love between you is bigger than the worst moment you shared. And I think that's what we're learning. The other big shift has been me working on my anxiety. I started individual therapy too, and Dr. Reeves, a different counselor, helped me understand that my mind is wired to assume danger when I don't have control. I've learned grounding techniques, ways to pause before catastrophizing. That day in the closet, my brain went from object found to child in danger in less than 3 seconds. I've learned to slow that down, to breathe before reacting. Megan has been a rock through all of this. She never once said, "I told you so," even though she had doubts from the start. She just listened, showed up, and occasionally took Lily for sleepovers so Ryan and I could have space to rebuild intimacy. Not just physical, but emotional safety too. 6 months later, we're still married. Still in therapy, still healing, but there's love here again, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need constant reassurance but shows up in small gestures. Ryan making me coffee every morning, me sitting on the porch with him after Lily's asleep, both of us knowing how close we came to losing everything, and in a strange, bittersweet way, I think this whole experience made us more honest with each other than we ever were before. I used to think trust was something you either had or didn't. Now I understand it's something you rebuild every day, One conversation at a time, one choice at a time. If anyone reading this ever finds themselves in that kind of panic, where your mind goes to the worst possible place, please, breathe first. Ask questions before you accuse. Fear can make you blind to the truth sitting right in front of you. I almost destroyed my family because I didn't pause long enough to consider that the world isn't always cruel. Sometimes it's just messy. Sometimes your kid hides their underwear in your husband's drawer because they think it's funny. And sometimes love, even when it breaks, can be strong enough to heal itself back together. It's been almost 4 years since that day. The day I thought I'd lost everything over one terrible assumption. I used to wake up in a cold sweat just remembering how I felt when I found those panties in Ryan's drawer. The way my whole world tilted in an instant. Now, it feels like a memory that belongs to someone else. A ghost from another life that occasionally brushes past but no longer haunts me. If someone had told me back then that Ryan and I would come out of this stronger, I would have laughed in their face. I didn't believe something so broken could be mended. But I was wrong. We stayed in therapy for almost a year after the misunderstanding. Slowly, painfully, but with a real sense of purpose. It wasn't about assigning blame anymore. It was about understanding how fear works, how trauma lingers, and how love needs more than apologies to survive. Dr. Cole helped us build new habits that, over time, became second nature. We learned to check in before reacting, to assume love before suspicion, to give each other space to explain before jumping to conclusions. About a year and a half later, Ryan and I renewed our vows, not as some grand romantic gesture, but as something quiet and personal. Just us, Lily, my sister Megan, and her husband in a little park near the lake. I still remember Ryan's voice shaking when he said, "This time, I promise to believe in us. Even when it hurts." I cried through the whole thing. Lily thought it was hilarious that Mommy kept smudging her makeup. She's 12 now, all legs, sass, and messy art projects. She's still our little trickster. She doesn't hide treasures in drawers anymore, but she loves pranking us. Taping googly eyes on the milk carton, replacing Ryan's socks with mine, stuff like that. Every time she does it, Ryan and I share this secret look, half amusement and half reverence for how something that once nearly tore us apart has turned into a shared joke about resilience. Our marriage isn't perfect, no one's is, but there's this quiet, steady peace in our home now. We talk about everything, even the uncomfortable stuff. When I start spiraling, Ryan doesn't get defensive anymore. He just reaches for my hand and says, "Tell me what you're afraid of." And when he feels distant or unappreciated, he says it out loud instead of letting resentment fester. That's something we had to teach ourselves. That love doesn't mean never feeling doubt. It means staying when the doubt comes, and working through it together. Ryan got promoted last year. He's now managing a team at his company, something he's wanted for a while. I took up a part-time job teaching art classes at the community center, something I used to dream about but never had the courage to try. Watching Lily paint at the back of the studio while I teach other kids feels like this full circle moment. Like I finally learned to build a life out of peace instead of fear. Megan still teases me sometimes. She'll bring up the drawer incident when I get overly dramatic about something minor. "Hey, remember the time you almost burned down your marriage over butterfly panties?" She'll say with that crooked grin. I always groan and tell her to shut up, but honestly, I'm grateful for it. It reminds me not to take everything so seriously, to breathe before reacting. A few months ago, Ryan found an old photo on his phone, the one he took the day we renewed our vows. He printed it and framed it for our anniversary. On the back, he wrote, "We learned to choose each other twice." That sentence hit me like a wave, because that's what it felt like, a choice. The first time, we chose each other out of love and hope. The second time, we chose each other out of forgiveness and faith. And that second choice means more than anything. We still go to therapy once every few months. Maintenance, as Dr. Cole calls it, not because we're broken, but because we don't ever want to forget how hard we fought to get here. I've learned that the scariest part of forgiveness isn't trusting the other person again. It's forgiving yourself for not knowing better, for letting fear control you. That's been my hardest battle, but now, when I look at Ryan, I don't see the man I accused. I see the man who held on, who loved me enough to walk through fire to reach me again. And every time I see Lily's mischievous grin, or hear her laughter echo through the house, I'm reminded that we almost lost all of this. Not because of something he did, but because of something I feared. I still keep that memory close, but not as punishment, as a reminder. A reminder to listen before assuming, to breathe before accusing, to love before fearing, because sometimes the monsters we're most afraid of aren't in other people. They're in our own minds, whispering worst-case scenarios that love can quiet, if you give it the chance. So yeah, we made it. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but truthfully. And if you'd told me 4 years ago that this story would end not with loss, but with understanding, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are, and for the first time in a very long time, I feel completely, utterly safe. Stories number 3. Did I do something wrong by not giving a discount to a kid? I work part-time at a small ice cream shop in our downtown area. It's a family-owned place that's been around for years. And honestly, it's one of the better jobs I've had. The atmosphere is relaxed. The regulars are sweet, and my boss, Karen, yes, that's really her name, is usually fair about scheduling. I'm 24 and have been there for almost 2 years while finishing college. Last week, something small happened that has weirdly been eating at me. It started on a sunny Saturday afternoon, one of our busiest days. We had a line practically out the door. Families, couples, teenagers, the usual summer chaos. I was working the register while my co-worker James handled scoops. We were flying through orders when this little boy, probably around 10 or 11, stepped up to the counter. He had one of those sweaty, crumpled dollar bills in his hand and asked for a double scoop and a waffle cone. I told him the total, $5.75. He frowned and counted his money, then looked back at me. "Can I get a discount?" "My mom only gave me $5, he said. His voice was polite, not whiny. Just genuinely hopeful. I felt for him, I really did. "But we don't do discounts unless it's for a promotion or loyalty card, and I'm not allowed to change prices on my own." So I smiled and said, "Sorry, we don't do discounts, but you can get a single scoop for $3.50. The boy's shoulders dropped a little. He looked at the menu again, sighed, and finally said, "Okay, I'll just get one scoop then." I took his money, gave him the change, and James scooped his ice cream. The kid said thank you and left quietly. I didn't think much of it, until about 10 minutes later, a woman stormed in. She looked furious, and I knew immediately she was the boy's mom. She slammed her purse on the counter and said, "Did you just refuse to give my son a discount?" I froze for a second. "Ma'am, I told him we don't do discounts, but I offered him the single scoop option." Her face turned red. "He's a child. You could have just let him have the extra scoop. It's not that deep. You're really going to nickel and dime a 10-year-old over a few cents." I tried to stay calm. "I understand, but I don't make the prices. I'm not allowed to give out free or discounted items without the owner's approval," she scoffed. "That's ridiculous. I'll be talking to your manager." Then she grabbed her son by the hand and walked out, muttering something about mean teenagers with no empathy. Karen wasn't there at the time, but of course, I told her what happened later. She actually laughed and said, "You did the right thing. People think because we're a small shop, we can just give things away. But it adds up." I thought that was the end of it. Until 2 days later, when the woman left a 1-star review online. She called me the heartless girl who wouldn't give a kid a discount, said we were ruining the joy of childhood, and even claimed I embarrassed her son in front of other customers. The review spread fast on our town's Facebook group. I don't use Facebook much, but my friend texted me a screenshot of people arguing in the comments. Some were defending me, saying rules are rules, while others said things like, "She should have had compassion. It's just ice cream." Now I can't lie, part of me does feel bad. I keep thinking about that boy's face when he realized he didn't have enough money. I know it's not my fault, but I also wonder if I should have just covered it myself. I mean, I've done that before for customers who come up short by a few cents. But that day, I was exhausted, hot, and just trying to keep the line moving. It didn't even cross my mind until afterward. The weird thing is, ever since that review, I've noticed more parents trying to guilt us for discounts. One even said, "You don't want to go viral for being the shop that denies kids ice cream, do you?" It's become this unspoken pressure now, and I hate it. I'm just an employee, not some villain trying to crush a kid's summer. James has been teasing me about it, calling me the ice cream enforcer, but he also told me he would have done the same thing. Karen said she doesn't care about the review, and that the woman has complained about every small business in town at some point. Still, I can't help but replay it in my head. Did I handle it too rigidly? Should I have quietly covered the 75 cents just to avoid the drama? I know rules are rules, but sometimes being right doesn't feel good. Later that week, something kind of ironic happened. A different kid, maybe 8 years old, came in with a handful of coins. Clearly short on his order, he looked embarrassed, so I smiled and said, "Don't worry, I got you." I covered the rest myself. His face lit up like Christmas morning. It made me realize that it's not about the discount or the money. It's about the moment. But I also know that as an employee, I can't be expected to make those judgment calls every time. That's how you end up losing your job or being taken advantage of. So yeah, maybe I wasn't wrong that day. Maybe I was just doing my job the way I was supposed to. But a small part of me still feels like the bad guy. Maybe because it's easier to be mad at a mean employee than to admit you didn't give your kid enough money. I don't know, it's such a small thing. But it spiraled into this huge moral question about compassion versus boundaries. And it's been sitting with me longer than it should. It's been about 3 weeks since the ice cream incident, and somehow, it's still following me around town like a bad song stuck in my head. After that 1-star review, the woman, whose name I've since learned is Sharon, became something of a local Facebook celebrity for her outrage. Every few days, someone would tag her post, and a new argument would break out. Some people agreed with her, "It's just ice cream, have a heart," while others defended me, "It's not the employee's job to hand out free stuff." At first, I tried to stay out of it, but when someone mentioned my name directly, it got uncomfortable. I'll admit it, I cried about it one night, not because I felt guilty about the ice cream, but because it's strange having strangers online discuss your character over something that small. It made me question whether being by the book was worth it when you're the one who ends up looking cold. Karen, my boss, found out about the continued drama and decided to post a polite but firm response on the shop's page. She wrote, "We love serving our community, but our employees are not authorized to change prices. Please remember they're doing their jobs. Thank you for your understanding." It was simple, respectful, and clear. Most people supported her, but a few accused her of teaching her staff to prioritize profit over kindness. She deleted the nastier comments, but the whole situation made me realize how easily small-town gossip can snowball into something ugly. Then one Saturday afternoon, Sharon herself came back into the shop, I swear. When I saw her walk through the door, I froze mid-scoop. She wasn't yelling this time, actually. She looked kind of embarrassed. Her son, the same boy from before, was with her. They came up to the counter, and she gave me this small, awkward smile. "Hey," she started. "I just wanted to apologize for how I handled things before. I was having a bad day, and I overreacted. You were just doing your job." I think I stood there blinking for a full 5 seconds before I managed, "Oh, thank you. That means a lot." She looked genuinely remorseful. "My son really likes your ice cream, and I didn't want him to think he couldn't come back here. I shouldn't have made it into such a big deal." I told her it was okay, that I understood how stressful parenting can be, and that I never meant to upset anyone. She nodded, paid for 2 cones full price, and left. It was surprisingly peaceful, almost anticlimactic after all the chaos. James, who'd been watching from the back, whispered, "Well, damn, I didn't see that coming." It felt like a huge weight off my shoulders. The next day, Sharon even edited her review. She didn't delete it entirely, but she changed it to 3 stars and added, "They handled my complaint gracefully, and my son still loves the ice cream." Honestly, that felt like a win. After that, things at work started to feel normal again. The jokes about me being the ice cream enforcer died down, and I could finally look customers in the eye without wondering if they'd read about me online. But something deeper changed for me too. The whole thing made me rethink how I deal with people, especially in customer service. It's easy to see everything as black and white, rules, prices, policy, but sometimes there's a human element that matters just as much. The next time a kid came in short on change, I didn't hesitate to quietly cover it myself. Not because I felt pressured or guilty, but because I wanted to. It felt right. When I chose to do it, that's the key difference. I wasn't being guilt-tripped or yelled at. It was just a small act of kindness I could afford. A few days later, Karen pulled me aside and told me she appreciated how I handled everything. "Not everyone would have stuck it out," she said. "You didn't argue, you didn't talk back online, and you kept showing up. That says a lot." It caught me off guard. I hadn't realized she noticed. I think in some way the situation made me a little tougher. And maybe a little softer, too. Tougher about boundaries, softer about people. It reminded me that behind every angry customer is usually someone stressed, tired, or overwhelmed. Still doesn't make it okay. But it helps to understand it. Moral of the story. No one wins in a war over a waffle cone. But sometimes, if you keep your cool long enough, things melt back into perspective. It's been almost a year since the discount kid incident, and looking back, I can honestly say it ended up changing me far more than I expected. What started as a dumb misunderstanding over 75 cents turned into one of those weird, defining moments that follow you quietly, reshaping how you handle people, conflict, and yourself after Sharon apologized. Things settled down at the shop, but the story didn't really disappear. People still bring it up sometimes. Not in a mean way. Just as part of local lore, someone will say, "Remember when that mom freaked out about the ice cream discount?" And everyone laughs, including me now. It's become a harmless joke, a story people tell when they want to talk about how small-town drama can get way too big, way too fast. I ended up staying at the shop longer than I'd planned. I finished school, got my degree, and kept working weekends because I genuinely enjoyed the place. Karen gave me more responsibility, training new hires, handling customer complaints, even managing inventory when she was out. I think that whole ordeal made her trust me more. She saw that I could stay calm under pressure, even when the internet turned a small mistake into a moral debate. One day, I came into work and found a note taped to the counter. It was from Sharon and her son. It said, "Thank you for being kind even when we weren't. You taught me more about grace than you know." Inside the envelope was a $10 bill and a drawing her son had made of an ice cream cone with "Best Shop Ever" written in messy kid handwriting. It sounds small, but I swear that letter meant more to me than any raise or compliment I'd gotten. I kept it in my wallet for months. The funny thing is, I don't even think Sharon was a bad person. She was just a mom having a bad day, embarrassed her kid didn't have enough money, and took it out on the wrong person. I get that now. I've had plenty of bad days since then too, and weirdly, that experience made me a better employee, and a better person in general. I learned that you can stand your ground and still be empathetic. That it's okay to follow rules, but it's also okay to bend them once in a while for the right reasons. The trick is knowing which situation you're in a few months later. I had another moment that mirrored the first one almost exactly. A little girl came in with her grandpa. She wanted a sundae, but when he opened his wallet, he realized he'd left his cash at home. He looked embarrassed, ready to tell her they'd come back another day. I just smiled and said, "Don't worry about it. I got it this time," he tried to insist, but I waved him off. It was $6, I covered it myself. The girl's smile was worth far more than that, and the grandpa came back the next day with cash and a box of donuts for us as a thank you. That's the kind of moment that reminds you why kindness matters. After that, I started quietly keeping a little pay-it-forward jar in my locker. Nothing official. Just a few bucks here and there for those times when someone came up short. The other employees started adding to it too. Karen eventually found out and made it a small part of our shop culture. Now there's a tiny sign that says, "If you're short a little, we've got you covered. Just pay it forward someday." It's simple, but it feels good. And it's funny how something that started as a Facebook argument turned into a small tradition that actually helps people. I still see Sharon and her son around sometimes. They always wave. The boy's older now, probably 12 or 13. The last time they came in, he ordered the same double scoop he wanted that first day. He handed me exact change and grinned like he was in on the joke. "Got enough this time," he said. We both laughed. It felt like closing a full circle. So, if there's one thing I've taken from this, it's that kindness and boundaries don't have to cancel each other out. You can care about people without letting them walk over you. You can forgive someone without pretending they didn't hurt you. You can do your job and still be human, and sometimes, the best lessons come from the dumbest little moments. Like refusing a discount on a scoop of ice cream and realizing, months later, that it taught you more about patience, empathy, and integrity than any job training ever could. Stories number 4. He keeps watching me. And my boyfriend thinks I'm overreacting when I 23 first started dating Tyler 26M. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. He was kind, charming, thoughtful. The kind of guy who'd stop to help an old lady cross the street, or remember to bring you your favorite drink just because. We met through mutual friends about a year ago, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was with someone who genuinely cared about me. The only thing that's ever made me uneasy about him is his little brother. Jake 18M. Tyler and Jake are close in age but could not be more different. Tyler is calm, collected, and steady. Jake is unpredictable. When I first met him, he seemed shy, barely made eye contact, quiet, always on his phone. I thought maybe he was just introverted, but over time, something about the way he acted around me started to make my skin crawl. It began subtly. If I came over to Tyler's place, Jake would always happen to be in the same room. Even if I went to the kitchen to get water, 5 minutes later he'd appear, pretending to grab something from the fridge but staring at me the whole time. Once, I caught him standing in the hallway outside Tyler's bedroom with no reason to be there. When I asked what he was doing, he mumbled something about looking for his charger and walked off. Then it escalated. One night, Tyler and I were watching a movie in his room. Jake came in without knocking, said he needed to borrow a pen, and instead of leaving right away, he just stood there, staring at me. Tyler laughed it off, telling him to stop being weird. But Jake didn't move until I said, "Do you need something else?" He left after that, but the look he gave me still gives me chills. It wasn't angry, exactly, just calculated after that. I started noticing small things missing. Lip balm from my purse, a hair tie, even a shirt I'd left in Tyler's laundry basket. I brushed it off at first. I'm forgetful. Maybe I misplaced them, but one weekend, Tyler and I were getting ready to go out, and Jake came into the kitchen wearing my hoodie. The same one I'd been looking for weeks. When I said, "Hey, that's mine," he smirked and said, "You left it here." Finders keepers, Tyler just rolled his eyes, telling him to stop being immature. But he didn't take it further than that. No give it back, no what the hell, dude. Just brushed it off like his brother was a mildly annoying kid instead of a walking red flag. I tried to talk to Tyler about it later, gently. I said Jake made me uncomfortable, and I didn't feel safe when he was around. Tyler sighed and said, "He's just awkward, babe. He doesn't know how to act around girls. He's not trying to be creepy." That was the first time I got frustrated, I told him. There's a difference between awkward and unsettling. He promised he'd talk to Jake, but a week went by and nothing changed. Then something happened that I can't get out of my head. I was at Tyler's house alone while he ran out to grab food. I was in the living room scrolling through my phone when I heard something. Soft footsteps from the hallway. I assumed it was Jake, so I called out, "Hey, your brother's home early." No response. I waited, and after a few seconds, I saw movement, someone standing just outside the doorway. Barely visible from the corner of my eye, I froze. "Jake?" I said. He stepped forward, grinning. "Didn't mean to scare you," I was shaking. He said he'd been just checking if anyone was home, even though he clearly knew I was there. I grabbed my bag and left immediately. When I told Tyler later, he said Jake probably thought I was someone else and I was reading into things too much. That was when I started pulling back. I stopped staying over at Tyler's house, made excuses to meet elsewhere. I thought maybe some distance would help, but then one night, I got a notification on my phone. Someone had tried to log into my Instagram from an unknown device. The username it listed? Jake's. That was it for me. I called Tyler, furious. He said Jake would never do that. But when I told him I had proof, he got quiet. Then he said, "I'll handle it." He didn't. Instead, Jake sent me a message 2 days later that said, "You shouldn't tell people lies about me." No context, no emojis. Just that. When I showed Tyler, he said Jake must have been joking. That was the breaking point. I told Tyler if he didn't take this seriously, I was done. He told me I was overreacting, that his brother just needed time to grow up. I haven't been back to his house since. But here's the thing that's keeping me awake at night. Last week, I saw Jake outside my apartment building. He didn't see me, at least, I don't think he did. He was across the street, leaning against a lamppost, wearing that same stupid hoodie he'd taken from me. I ducked back inside before he could notice. I texted Tyler, asking if Jake was with him, and he said yeah, Jake was home playing video games. So either Tyler lied, or Jake lied to him. I don't know what to do anymore. Tyler keeps saying I'm being paranoid, that maybe it was someone who looked like him. But every instinct in me says otherwise. My best friend Rachel thinks I need to break things off before this gets worse. She said, if he won't protect you, you have to protect yourself, and she's right. But it's not that easy. I love Tyler. I really do. He's good to me in every other way. But how can I feel safe with someone who refuses to see what's right in front of him? I keep replaying that night I saw Jake in the doorway, the way he smiled like he knew I was trapped. And I can't stop thinking, what if I hadn't noticed him? What if I'd stayed? I'm scared. And I don't know how to make Tyler understand that this isn't just about discomfort. It's about fear. Because the truth is, I don't think Jake's just awkward. I think something's really wrong with him. And I think if I stay quiet, I might regret it. Update. I didn't want to write this. I really didn't, but too much has happened. And I feel like if I don't put this somewhere, I'll lose my mind. After I made that last post, I decided to take Rachel's advice and distance myself from Tyler. I didn't say we're done yet, But I told him I needed space. He didn't fight it. Just said he didn't understand why I was making things weird. That was almost 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've been trying to focus on work and therapy. My therapist, Dr. Williams, said something that stuck with me. When people minimize your fear, it doesn't mean the fear is irrational. That hit me hard because that's exactly what Tyler kept doing, making me feel like I was imagining things. For a few days, I actually felt calmer. No strange messages, no mysterious figures outside my building. I started to believe maybe I was overreacting. Then last Thursday happened. I was coming home from work around 8 p.m., tired and half listening to a podcast. As I reached my building, I noticed a car parked across the street. Old, beat up, gray, nothing unusual, except I could see someone sitting inside with the headlights off. I wouldn't have thought twice, except when I went inside and looked out the lobby window. The person turned their head, and I swear, it was Jake. I froze. My stomach dropped, I blinked, and the car's headlights turned on. And then he drove off. I immediately texted Tyler, me. Was Jake at your house just now? Tyler, yeah, why? Me, are you sure? Tyler, he's literally in the basement playing Xbox. Why? I didn't answer. I just sat on the stairs for a while, shaking. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was someone who looked like him. But I couldn't let it go. So 2 days later, I drove to Tyler's place. I didn't tell him I was coming. I just needed to see for myself that Jake was actually there. When I got there, the house was quiet. Tyler opened the door, surprised. Hey, he said, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Didn't think you were coming over. I told him we needed to talk. He sighed and led me to the living room. The air felt thick. I told him everything. The car, the hoodie, the feeling that Jake was following me. And you know what he said? Babe, you're spiraling. You're seeing patterns that aren't there, I snapped. I told him he was gaslighting me, that this was serious, that I didn't feel safe. I asked him to check Jake's phone, his location, something. He refused. I'm not violating my brother's privacy because you're paranoid. That word, paranoid, made something in me break. So I said, if you don't believe me, I'm leaving. He just looked at me and said quietly, then leave. So I did. I drove home, crying so hard I had to pull over twice. When I got to my apartment, I locked every door, every window, and then around midnight, I got a notification on my phone, motion detected on my apartment's front camera. I clicked the video, and there he was, Jake, standing at my door. He didn't knock. Didn't try the handle, just stood there, looking straight into the camera for almost a full minute. Then he smiled, that same slow, eerie smile, and walked away. I thought I was going to throw up. I called the police. They came within 15 minutes, and I showed them the video. They took a report and said they'd talk to him, but I could tell they didn't think it was serious. He didn't try to enter, one of them said. Might just be a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. The next morning I called Tyler. He didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail. I said, if you don't get your brother under control, I'm getting a restraining order. He texted back an hour later. I can't believe you called the cops. You're blowing this way out of proportion. That was it. No apology. No concern for me. Just that. Rachel stayed over with me that night because I was terrified to be alone. She helped me change the locks and set up a couple of cheap cameras in the hallway. For a few days, nothing happened. No more visits. No weird cars, nothing. I started to breathe again. Then Sunday morning, I woke up to find my car keyed. Deep scratches along both sides, and written across the back window in what looked like permanent marker were the words, "Stop lying about me." I broke down. Rachel helped me file another police report. This time, they took it more seriously since there was property damage and a clear pattern. They said they'd contact Jake and issue a warning. Later that day, Tyler finally called. His voice was cold. You need to stop making Jake out to be some psycho. He told me you've been stalking him online, trying to ruin his life. I couldn't even respond. I just hung up. That's when I realized something that hit me harder than anything else. Tyler was never going to protect me. He was never going to believe me. He'd rather believe his brother, a grown man who watches women through cameras and follows them, than believe me, the woman he claimed to love. So I made a decision. I packed my things, left town, and moved in with my aunt in Ohio temporarily. She's retired, lives in a quiet area, and has been incredibly supportive. I changed my number. I deleted every trace of Tyler and Jake from my life. But sometimes, I still catch myself checking my window before I sleep. Sometimes I dream that I wake up, and he's standing there, in the corner of my room, smiling. I know that's probably just trauma, But I also know that if I hadn't trusted my gut, things could have ended much worse. I learned something through all this. When someone shows you who they are, or who their family is, believe them the first time, because ignoring red flags doesn't make them go away. It just gives them time to get closer. Final update, it's been almost 4 months since I left town, and I finally feel like I can breathe again. Writing this feels like closing a chapter that nearly destroyed me, but also one I survived, and that still shocks me when I think about how real it all became. After I moved in with my aunt in Ohio, I tried to go completely no contact. No calls, no texts, no checking social media. I thought that if I disappeared from their radar, everything would fade, but about a month later, the detective from the local police department back in Indiana, Officer Morgan, called me. He said he wanted to follow up about my report. I didn't expect much, honestly. I assumed they'd written it off as some petty family drama, but he sounded serious. He told me Jake had been picked up for trespassing and vandalism after another woman in Tyler's neighborhood reported him lurking outside her window. The police found some of her mail and small personal items in Jake's car, along with a black hoodie, gloves, and multiple SD cards. When they went through those cards, they found footage of me, footage from outside my apartment, of me walking to my car, of me sleeping through the blinds, of me inside my living room. Footage I didn't even know was possible to get. That's when it clicked. The time my Wi-Fi cameras glitched, the weird noises, the light flickers. He'd probably been hacking into my devices. I felt sick. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Officer Morgan said Jake wasn't denying it. He claimed it was just a game, that he liked watching people, but never meant harm. He also said Tyler knew some of it, which made my blood run cold. I asked the officer what that meant, but he said they were still piecing it together. So, of course, I called Tyler. He didn't answer the first time or the second, finally. Late that night, he sent a single text. "Please stop calling me. I can't deal with this." I almost laughed. He couldn't deal with it? A few days later, I got an email from one of Tyler's old co-workers, Jordan, who had seen my story after it made local news. She said Tyler had been telling people I was unstable and that I ruined his family. But then, apparently, after Jake's arrest, Tyler stopped showing up to work altogether. Jordan said she thought he'd finally realized how deep his brother's obsession went. Then, one night, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Tyler. His voice was wrecked, hoarse, tired, nothing like the man I used to know. He told me that after Jake was arrested, the police searched their house. They found a small USB drive hidden under Jake's bed. On it were hundreds of photos, taken over years, of random women, neighbors, co-workers, and me. He told me he'd had no idea, that he thought Jake was just awkward and immature. But he admitted something I'll never forget. "When you first told me he was creeping you out, I did think you were overreacting, but I also didn't want to believe what that meant about me, about what kind of person I was living with." That sentence hit like a punch, because that's exactly what I'd been trying to make him see for months. He apologized, genuinely this time. He said he'd been in denial. That part of him couldn't handle the idea that his brother was dangerous. He cried. I could hear the guilt in his voice, and for the first time, I believed he was sorry. But I also knew it didn't change anything. I told him I forgave him, not because what he did was okay, but because I needed to let it go for my own sanity. I told him I hoped he got therapy, that I hoped he learned to listen when people told him they were scared. He said he was planning to move away, maybe start over somewhere new. Then he said something that made me go completely silent. "I think Jake might have been obsessed with you." I didn't respond. I just said goodbye and hung up. The police ended up charging Jake with multiple counts of voyeurism, trespassing, and cyber harassment. He took a plea deal and will probably serve a few years. It's not enough, not really. But at least there's a record now. At least I'm not looking over my shoulder every second, wondering if anyone would believe me if something happened. I've been in therapy twice a week since then. Dr. Williams has been a lifeline. She told me something that really stuck. People like Jake operate in silence because people like Tyler protect them through disbelief. That's what I want anyone reading this to understand. Sometimes the danger doesn't come from monsters hiding in the dark. It comes from people who refuse to see them. I've started teaching again at a small community college here. It feels good to rebuild something. My aunt says I'm finally smiling again, that my voice doesn't shake when I tell stories anymore. But I still don't trust easily. I still check my locks 3 times. I still flinch when I see a car idling too long outside. I'm working on it. Healing isn't linear. A few weeks ago, I got an email from Tyler one last time. It was short. I wanted to thank you for speaking up. You probably saved other women. I'll never forgive myself for not believing you. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I'm finally free. If anyone out there ever finds themselves in a situation like this, where your instincts scream that something is wrong, listen to them. Don't wait for someone else to validate your fear, because the truth is, sometimes survival starts the moment you stop asking for permission to feel afraid, and for me, that moment saved my life. Stories number 5. When I accidentally humiliated my coworker for flirting with me, I never thought I'd be writing something like this. But it's been stuck in my head for weeks, and honestly, I feel like a total idiot for how it all played out. For context, I'm 36M. Been married to my wife Kelly 34F for almost 10 years. We've got 2 kids, 9 and 6, and I work as a project coordinator for a mid-sized marketing firm in Illinois. About 3 months ago, a new hire joined our team. Her name's Emily 24F. She's fresh out of college, smart, driven, and really easy to get along with. Everyone liked her immediately. She's the kind of person who walks into a room and just lights it up. We were paired up for a few projects, and I tried to help her get comfortable with the workflow and office politics. At first, it was all very normal, just coworker stuff. She'd ask questions. We'd grab coffee when deadlines were tight, and we'd chat about music or random stuff to kill time during long meetings. I didn't think much of it until she started crossing little lines that, looking back, I should have handled more delicately. It started with casual compliments. You're really good at this. Your wife's lucky. You're so patient. Or, you're like the only guy here who actually listens. Stuff that seemed harmless. I'd smile, thank her, and move on. Then she started doing small things like bringing me coffee, just the way you like it, or staying late to help me finish reports. Even when I told her she didn't need to, Kelly noticed me mentioning Emily a few times and jokingly said, "You talk about her a lot." I brushed it off because I genuinely didn't think anything was happening. But I'll admit, part of me enjoyed the attention. Not in a cheating way, but after years of diapers, bills, and routine, having someone younger look at you like you're interesting again, it does something to your ego, even if you don't want it to. Anyway, a few Fridays ago, after a particularly stressful week, a bunch of us went out for drinks, Emily came along, and we all ended up at this loud little dive bar near the office. At some point, she leaned over and told me I looked way too good to be a dad of 2. I kind of laughed it off, but she didn't stop. She got bolder as the night went on, complimenting my shirt, touching my arm, asking about my marriage in that overly curious, slightly too intimate way. Then, as people started leaving, she asked if I wanted to grab one more drink somewhere quieter. That's when I knew this was going somewhere bad. I told her as gently as I could, "Emily, you're great, but this isn't appropriate. I'm married, and I really don't want to cross any lines." She froze. Her face went red, then pale. She stammered something about just joking, then said she needed to go. I felt like I'd kicked a puppy. Monday morning was brutal. She barely made eye contact when we were in meetings. She was polite but distant. Then about a week later, my manager, Robert, called me into his office. Apparently, Emily had gone to HR saying she felt embarrassed and uncomfortable after being rejected publicly. Publicly? We were alone at a bar, but I guess she told someone else at work before I could explain anything. HR didn't accuse me of anything, but they reminded me about boundaries and said they'd talk to her as well. I left feeling like I was somehow the bad guy. Now things are tense. Emily barely speaks to me, but when she does, it's clipped and professional. I get weird looks from a few coworkers who clearly know something went down. Kelly knows part of the story. I told her Emily had made things awkward, but I didn't tell her about the flirting or the "you look too good" line. I didn't want to make her feel insecure or think I'd encouraged anything. Still, the guilt is eating me alive. I didn't flirt back, I didn't cheat, but I keep wondering if I mishandled it. Maybe I should have shut it down earlier. Maybe I should have talked to HR before she did. Maybe I shouldn't have accepted those coffees or stayed late working with her. Last week, we had another team happy hour. Emily didn't come. One of her friends from work said, "Yeah, she's been avoiding those since the thing with you." I didn't ask what the thing meant, because honestly, I didn't want to know. Now I feel like the creepy older guy in the office. Even though all I did was say no. The worst part? Every time I try to talk about it with Kelly, I freeze. Because deep down, I know I liked being noticed. And that's the part that makes me feel like I really did mess up. I don't even know what the right move is anymore. Avoid her completely? Try to make peace? Ask HR to move me to another project? All I know is, one conversation meant to set a boundary somehow turned into a story where I look like the villain. And that, my friends, is how I managed to ruin a perfectly normal working relationship and accidentally humiliate someone who probably didn't deserve it. All because I didn't see the line until it was already crossed. It's been about 2 months since I first posted about what happened with Emily, and honestly, I wish I could say everything has blown over. But it hasn't. It's just shifted right after the whole HR meeting. I decided to put as much distance between myself and Emily as possible without making it look like I was avoiding her. I asked my manager, Robert, if I could work more remotely for focus reasons, and he was fine with that since a lot of my job is coordination and project tracking. That small change saved my sanity for a while. But office gossip is like smoke. It lingers even when the fire's long gone. Apparently, Emily told a few people that I made her uncomfortable by leading her on. She didn't say I'd done anything inappropriate, but she painted this vague picture that made it sound like I'd been flirty and then cruel when I rejected her. The story spread quietly, not in a full-on scandal way, but in that whispered, sideways glance sort of office buzz that makes your skin crawl. One day, I walked into the break room and 2 co-workers stopped talking mid-sentence. That's when I realized I'd become that guy. Meanwhile, I finally came clean to Kelly. Everything. Every awkward compliment. Every late night at the office. Every detail I expected her to explode, to accuse me of emotionally cheating or something worse. But instead, she just went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm not mad that you were honest too late. I'm mad that you weren't honest with yourself sooner." That hit hard. She said she could tell I'd been craving validation. That I'd been feeling invisible at home. And that she had too. The kids, work, bills, it all swallowed our marriage a bit. And when someone came along who made me feel seen, I didn't cross a line, but I stood right next to it and looked down. We started couples therapy after that, not because of Emily exactly, but because Kelly said she didn't want to wait until resentment or boredom turned into something irreversible. It's uncomfortable, but we're making progress, at work though. Things got even more awkward before they got better. HR called me back in for a follow-up, apparently. Emily had mentioned feeling ostracized since the incident, and HR wanted to make sure no one was retaliating against her. Retaliating? I'd been avoiding her like she was radioactive, so they had us do a mediation meeting with a neutral HR rep. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Emily looked miserable. Not angry, just embarrassed. She said she hadn't meant to make things this big, that she'd just felt caught off guard when I rejected her, and that she didn't realize people would gossip. I told her I didn't blame her, but that I wished she'd come to me directly. The HR rep thanked us both for being mature, and told us to document any future uncomfortable interactions, which was their way of saying, "We're watching you both." After that, Emily and I found a weird rhythm. Polite, distant professionalism, no jokes, no side conversations, no late nights working together. We basically pretend the other doesn't exist unless absolutely necessary. Then about 3 weeks ago, Robert pulled me aside again. He said Emily had put in her 2 weeks' notice. She'd gotten an offer at another firm downtown. I was surprised by how relieved I felt, and also a little sad, not because I missed her, but because I knew this whole mess didn't have to end like this. On her last day, she left a small envelope on my desk. No note, just a tiny piece of paper that said, "I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to cause problems. I hope you and your family are okay." That hit me harder than I expected. I realized that as messy as it all got, we were both just human beings fumbling through complicated emotions. She didn't want to be the villain any more than I did. At home, things are better. Kelly and I have been spending more time together. Not just as parents, but as partners. We started doing no-phone nights twice a week where we cook, talk, and sometimes just watch a show without doom scrolling. I didn't realize how much we'd both been existing next to each other instead of with each other. I've also been reflecting a lot on how easy it is to let small boundaries slide when you're flattered. You tell yourself it's harmless, that you're just being friendly, but there's a point where intent stops mattering and perception takes over. I wasn't a creep, but I also wasn't as self-aware as I should have been now. I make it a rule never to be alone with younger coworkers outside of work settings. Not because I don't trust myself, but because I don't want to put anyone in a position where something could be misinterpreted. It's sad it has to be that way, but it's the reality of modern workplaces. As for Emily, I hope she's doing okay. I looked her up on LinkedIn, yeah. I know and saw she's already working as a senior coordinator at her new firm. Good for her. She'll probably forget about this whole mess in a few years. I hope I can too, but if I learned anything from this, it's that intentions aren't enough. You can mean well, do mostly the right thing, and still end up hurting people, or yourself, if you don't recognize emotional boundaries soon enough. Kelly told me the other night, you didn't screw up by saying no, you screwed up by waiting until you had to. And that's exactly it. So, if anyone reading this ever finds themselves in a similar situation, don't wait until it's uncomfortable. Don't rationalize it. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. Shut it down early, kindly, clearly, because by the time it feels like something, it already is. It's been almost 2 years since that entire situation blew up, and it still occasionally crosses my mind, usually when I'm driving home from work or sitting in a quiet moment after the kids go to bed. What's strange is how something that felt like the end of the world back then has now become one of those life-defining lessons I wouldn't trade, even though I'd never want to live it again. After Emily left the company, things eventually went back to normal. Or at least, a new version of normal. The whispers faded. People moved on to fresher gossip. The only lingering sign was how careful everyone became with boundaries afterward. No one stays late alone anymore. Coffee runs are group activities. It's like our entire office collectively learned from my mistake. Robert, my manager, told me a few months later that HR quietly revised their social conduct policy, adding clearer language about workplace relationships, mentorship, and off-hours interactions. He said, "Don't take this the wrong way, man, but your mess might have saved us from a bigger one later." I laughed. But I also felt this strange mix of pride and shame. Pride that something good came out of it. Shame that it had to come from my screw-up, about 6 months after Emily left. She actually sent me a short LinkedIn message. Just a simple, "Hey, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to thank you for how you handled things in the end. I've learned a lot since then." That was it. No awkwardness, no subtext, just closure. I didn't reply beyond a polite, "Glad you're doing well." But I can't lie. It brought a sense of relief I didn't realize I still needed. On the home front, Kelly and I are stronger than we've been in years. Therapy did wonders, not because of what happened with Emily, but because it forced us to really see each other again. We'd both gotten stuck in the monotony of being parents and providers, not partners. We were coexisting, not connecting. Now we're more intentional. We do date nights again, real ones, not grab Chipotle after soccer practice and call it romance. We joined a couple's hiking group. Yeah, I know, super suburban. And last summer, we took the kids camping for the first time. Kelly still teases me about how I freaked out when I saw a raccoon near the tent. But honestly, those memories feel like new bricks laid on top of an old foundation. Stronger, steadier. Kelly told me not long ago that she's proud of how I handled things. "That still shocks me," she said. "You made a mistake, but you didn't let it turn into something worse. You could have lied or shut down or blamed her instead. You owned it." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until she said it. For the longest time, I thought the whole ordeal had branded me. That I'd always be the guy who made things weird. But in truth, it made me a better husband, co-worker, and human being, career-wise. I actually got promoted about 9 months ago. Robert recommended me to lead a new cross-departmental initiative, and when HR signed off, I swear I felt like I'd passed some invisible test. I've even had to train a few younger employees since then, men and women, and I take that responsibility so much more seriously now. I make sure my mentorship is structured, transparent, and documented. No after-hours texts, no personal compliments, no gray areas. Funny enough, I told one of my newer team members, a guy named Aaron, about what happened in general terms, not names or details. He'd been venting about a coworker who was flirting with him even though he had a girlfriend. I said, "Don't wait until it's awkward. Be kind but be clear." He took that advice, and a few weeks later told me, "Man, thank you. That could have gotten messy." It hit me. I'd become the older guy giving the advice I wish someone had given me. Every now and then, I still get flashes of guilt. Not because I did something horrible, but because I saw how easily misunderstanding and ego can unravel people. Emily was young, inexperienced, maybe a little reckless with emotions. I was older, more aware. I should have seen where things were headed. But hindsight is merciless like that. The one conversation that finally gave me peace came last Christmas. Kelly and I were hosting dinner for her family, and after everyone went home she said, "You know what I realized tonight? I trust you completely again." I asked her when that changed, and she said, "When you stopped trying to prove it, that stuck with me. For so long, I tried to earn back her trust by walking on eggshells. But trust doesn't rebuild through grand gestures. It rebuilds quietly, through consistency, through ordinary moments done right. Over and over, these days, I still work for the same company. But I'm remote 3 days a week. I love it. I get to pick up the kids from school, cook dinner, actually be present. Kelly's gone back to school part-time for her nursing degree, which she always wanted to do. Life feels stable, earned, looking back. That whole thing with Emily wasn't just about boundaries. It was about honesty, the kind you have with yourself. I'd been pretending that being faithful meant just not cheating, but it's more than that. It's about integrity, self-awareness, and understanding that emotional lines can blur long before physical ones ever do. If I could go back, I'd tell my past self, don't ignore the small moments that make your gut twist. Don't hide harmless things from your partner. And never underestimate how much clarity matters. In the workplace, in marriage, in life, because one small misunderstanding can ripple out in ways you never see coming. But if you face it head-on with humility, accountability, and maybe a bit of luck, it doesn't have to destroy you. It can actually teach you how to live better. And in my case, it did. Stories number 6. She wanted to pull out her entire 401k after being scammed. I said no. And now she's furious. I never thought I'd be the one telling my mom no about her own money. But here we are. I, 29 have spent the last year basically being my mom's unofficial financial guardian after she fell for what I can only describe as the most elaborate, manipulative scam I've ever heard of. My mom, Karen, is 61. She's worked hard her entire life. She started as a nurse, later became a home health supervisor, and had always been really proud of the retirement nest egg she'd built. She wasn't rich, but she was stable. She'd saved just over $1 million between her 401k, a Roth IRA, and some investments she'd made in mutual funds. My dad, Robert, passed away 5 years ago from heart failure, and after that, she really withdrew from everything. I live 2 states away in Ohio, but I call her daily and visit every few months. She's lonely, and I get it. About 2 years ago, she met a man online named Edward. At first, she said he was a friend from a travel forum. Just someone she chatted with about hiking and photography. I thought it was cute that she had someone to talk to. Then it turned into phone calls, then video chats. Then Edward started having problems. His investment business in Dubai was frozen because of legal issues. He couldn't access his bank, and he needed help, just until things cleared up. You can probably see where this is going. By the time I realized what was happening, my mom had wired this man $65,000. I flipped out. She was crying, saying I didn't understand, that he was going to pay her back, that he'd shown her receipts of his assets. Every red flag imaginable was waving, but she couldn't see it. Over the next 14 months, she sent him more money, slowly draining her savings, selling her car, even taking out a home equity loan. She was convinced he was real every time I'd confront her. She'd pull away from me. I tried to report it, called the local police, even talked to the FBI's Internet Crime Unit. They logged it, but there wasn't much they could do without her cooperation. By the time she finally admitted it was a scam, she'd lost over $2 million. I remember that day so vividly. I was sitting across from her in her living room, and she looked empty. She said, "He stopped answering me. I think he's gone." That was it. Just like that, it clicked for her. She realized she'd been talking to a phantom. I didn't even know how to comfort her. She'd spent years building her security, and now it was gone. She was humiliated. She refused to tell anyone else in the family. Not her sister, not her friends, nobody. I became her confidant, therapist, and damage control team all in one. The problem started again about 6 months later. She got another message online. A man named Jonathan from California who worked in real estate. I begged her not to respond. I told her outright that she had a pattern. She needed therapy, not another long-distance romance. She promised she'd never send money again. Then last month, I logged into her financial portal. I have joint access now because she asked me to help track her bills, and I saw a request to withdraw $300,000 from her 401k. I nearly passed out. I called her immediately. She said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just temporary. I'm helping someone with a short-term investment." I told her point blank, "Mom, that's not happening." She got defensive, almost childlike. It's my money, she said. You don't get to tell me what I can do, I said. You asked me to help you manage your accounts because you admitted you can't trust yourself with this. If you go through with this, you'll lose everything. Again, she hung up on me a few hours later. I got a call from her financial advisor. Susan, she said my mom had called her directly, asking to withdraw everything from her 401k immediately. Thankfully, Susan froze the transaction and called me, together. We convinced my mom to come in and talk face to face. That meeting was brutal. She sat there crying, saying I was treating her like a child, that she just wanted to feel independent again. I tried to stay calm, but it's hard to reason with someone who's in denial. She said this new man wasn't like Edward, that he was verified, that he'd shown her proof of his business. I told her scammers know exactly what to say to people who've been scammed before. They target them again because they know they're vulnerable. Eventually, I told her, I'm sorry, but if you pull your retirement now, you'll be broke within a year, you'll lose your house, you'll have nothing. She told me I was cruel, that I was power hungry, that I was worse than the scammers, because at least they made her feel loved. That line gutted me. After that, she stopped speaking to me for 2 weeks. My aunt, her sister, called, telling me to back off and let mom handle her own business. I explained everything, and she was horrified. She had no idea how bad it had gotten. Eventually, my mom called me crying. She said she knew I was right, but felt trapped in her own mistakes. She said every time she looks at her bank balance, she feels worthless. She begged me to just let her do one more chance investment to make it all back. I told her no, flat out. She hung up again. That was 3 weeks ago. She's still angry, still saying I don't understand her pain. I visit her once a week now, and she's cold but polite. I'm trying to get her into therapy for financial abuse recovery, but she refuses. She says, I'm not crazy. Meanwhile, I've set up financial safeguards. She can't make withdrawals without 2 approvals, mine and her advisor's. She technically could fight it, but right now she's too ashamed to. I don't like being in control of her money. It feels wrong, but I can't just let her destroy what little she has left. Sometimes I sit up at night wondering if I overstepped, if maybe I really am treating her like a child. But then I think about the look on her face when she realized Edward was fake. And I know I'm not doing this to control her. I'm doing it to protect her. And maybe one day she'll see that. It's been about 4 months since I first wrote that post. And things have changed. Some for the better, some for the worse. I honestly didn't expect anyone to care when I wrote about what happened with my mom. I was just venting, frustrated, and honestly terrified of losing her both emotionally and financially. But reading through the comments, people who had gone through the same thing with their parents or grandparents, it made me feel less alone. I wish I could say that reading all that advice somehow fixed everything. But this isn't a story that gets tied up neatly. This has been a slow, messy process of learning how to protect someone you love without turning into their warden. After my mom's 401k withdrawal attempt was stopped, she refused to talk to me for nearly a month. She told my aunt, Lisa, that she was thinking about hiring a lawyer to get her money back from me. Even though I didn't actually take anything, all I did was put safety checks in place so she couldn't withdraw large amounts without my approval and her advisors. When I found out she said that, it crushed me. It made me realize just how deep her shame runs. She can't face what happened, so she blames the person standing closest to her. Still, I didn't back off completely. I sent her groceries, paid her internet bill because she'd forgotten, and texted her daily, even when she didn't respond. Then, in early August, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. It was the first time I'd seen her in person since that disastrous meeting at the advisor's office. She looked tired, thinner, like she hadn't been sleeping well. She hugged me, the kind of hug that says, I hate how this has gone, but I don't know how to fix it. We talked for hours. She admitted she'd been angry, not just at me but at herself. She said she couldn't stand the silence in her house, and when Jonathan had started talking to her, it felt like someone finally saw her again. When he turned out to be another scammer, she said it broke something in her. She confessed that she almost went through with withdrawing the money behind my back by trying to open a new brokerage account under a slightly different name. But the bank flagged it because of the joint access alerts we'd set up. She said that's when she realized how bad it had gotten, how desperate she'd become for the illusion of control. That conversation was the first real breakthrough we'd had in months. I didn't lecture her, I just listened. For once, she didn't try to justify what she did. She cried, apologized, and said she was scared that she'd ruined her life and didn't deserve to have anyone help her. That same week, I convinced her to meet with a therapist who specializes in financial trauma and elder fraud. Her name's Dr. Miller, and she's been a godsend. My mom resisted the first 2 sessions but gradually started opening up. Apparently, what she's dealing with is really common. Scammers target people who've lost partners because they know loneliness can override logic. Around mid-September, she called me out of the blue and said she wanted to join a local support group for scam victims. That was the first time in a long time she'd made a proactive choice for herself. She's gone to every meeting since. There's still tension, though. She hates that she needs me to approve her financial moves. Every few weeks, she'll say something like, "You'll let me handle my own money soon, right?" And I have to gently tell her we're not there yet. She gets defensive, and I can tell it still stings her pride. But she's improving. She doesn't talk to strangers online anymore. She got a rescue cat named Willow, started gardening again, and she's been reconnecting with old friends from her nursing days. One moment that really stuck with me happened last month. We were having coffee at her kitchen table, and she said, "I used to think money was what made me feel safe. Now I think it's people." That's the closest she's come to forgiving herself. Financially, things are still tough. Between the scam and taxes on the early withdrawals she did make before I stepped in, she's down to maybe $230,000 total in retirement savings. Not nothing, but not enough to live comfortably without working a few more years. She's picked up part-time shifts as a home health nurse again. I offered to help her financially, but she refuses. She's trying to rebuild, not just her finances, but her dignity. The hardest part for me has been learning to trust her again, too. There's always this nagging fear that I'll get a call one day and find out she fell for another scam. But I'm trying to let her grow. I can't protect her from everything. And part of loving someone is accepting that. The funny thing is, she's now the one warning others. She's been volunteering at the local senior center, giving talks about online scams and how to spot red flags. The same woman who once told me I was cruel for stopping her from helping a fake man is now teaching others not to make the same mistake. Sometimes she'll call and tell me, "I helped someone today. They were about to send money to a guy who said he was stuck overseas, and I stopped them." When she says that, I can hear a bit of her old pride returning. It's slow progress, but it's progress. I've also realized something about myself through all this. Control and protection aren't the same thing. I wanted to fix her, to make her safe, but what she really needed was space to heal, with guidance, not force. We're okay now, not perfect, but okay. We have dinner together every Sunday. She still grumbles about my financial babysitting, but she laughs when she says it now. I guess that's as close to a happy ending as we're going to get. It's been just over a year since everything with my mom's scam nightmare happened, and writing this feels like finally closing a chapter that's been hanging open for too long. When I first posted, I was exhausted, emotionally, financially, and mentally. I felt like I'd become the parent in our relationship, constantly cleaning up after her decisions, trying to pull her back from the edge while she resented me for it. Now, a year later, I can honestly say things are different. They're not perfect, but they're better. And I finally understand what better really looks like when you're healing from something like this. After my last update, my mom kept seeing Dr. Miller, the therapist who specializes in financial trauma. At first, she treated the sessions like a punishment. She'd go quiet, shrug through questions, and come home frustrated. But somewhere along the way, she started actually talking. Dr. Miller helped her dig into why she kept falling for these scammers. It wasn't about greed or gullibility. It was about loneliness, fear, and wanting to feel needed after my dad passed. Hearing that broke me a little, because as angry as I'd been at her, I realized she wasn't being stupid. She was being human. She'd spent decades being mom, and when Dad died, that identity just disappeared. Those scammers weren't selling her fake investments. They were selling her comfort. It's strange how much empathy can shift things. Once I saw her through that lens, I started treating her differently. I stopped talking to her like she was fragile or reckless, and started treating her like a partner in her own recovery. We made plans together, small goals to rebuild trust and independence. She agreed to take financial literacy classes at the local community center. It started out of necessity, but she ended up loving it. She'd call me to tell me about budgeting tools or interest rate strategies like a kid showing off a science project. The pride in her voice was something I hadn't heard in years. By spring, she'd saved up enough to open a new account entirely on her own. But with fraud alerts and safeguards in place, She even bought a small used car after her old one gave out, handling every bit of the transaction herself. Watching her double-check paperwork and ask all the right questions made me so proud I almost cried. She still has some paranoia though, just in the opposite direction. Now she refuses to open any link or answer unknown calls, even legitimate ones. Once, her utility company called to confirm a meter reading, and she hung up saying, "Nice try, scammer." So yeah, we've swung a little far to the other side, but it's a good problem to have. Financially, things are steady. She's working part-time as a private home nurse for an elderly couple, and it's been great for her. She gets to care for others again, which gives her purpose, but it's not as emotionally draining as her old full-time hospital work. Plus, she's meeting real people, not the fake ones hiding behind profile pictures. A few months ago, something kind of poetic happened. The police actually caught a small ring of scammers who had been targeting people in her area. They recovered partial digital trails, and while she didn't get any of her money back, she did get a letter from a victim advocacy group acknowledging her case. She cried when she read it. It was the first time she felt seen, not as a fool, but as a victim who survived. We've even started rebuilding some of the money she lost. I set her up with a financial advisor who's been incredible, patient, ethical, and blunt when he needs to be. Together, they came up with a long-term plan that doesn't involve risky investments or withdrawals. One of the biggest milestones came last month. We finally removed my joint authorization over her 401k. It was terrifying, like watching your kid drive off alone for the first time. But she earned it. Before we did it, she looked at me and said, "I promise you, I'll never let loneliness make me stupid again." That sentence will stick with me for the rest of my life. We celebrated that day with dinner at her favorite restaurant. She toasted me, said I was her anchor and her pain in the butt. I laughed because that's exactly what I'd been. There's still fallout, of course. The $1 million she lost is gone. She'll never fully recover that financially, but emotionally, she's richer now than I think she's been in years. She has boundaries, community, and self-respect again. She volunteers twice a month with a local nonprofit that educates seniors on online scams. The irony isn't lost on either of us, watching her stand in front of a group of retirees, showing them how to spot fake bank emails, is something I never thought I'd see. One time, she even told her story publicly, used her real name and everything. She said, "If one person hears this and avoids what I went through, it'll be worth the embarrassment." And I sat there in the back of the room trying not to cry. As for me, I've learned that sometimes protecting someone means stepping into the role of the bad guy. For months, I thought I was heartless for locking her accounts, for saying no, when she begged me to just let her handle it. But now I realize, love isn't always soft. Sometimes it's firm, even when it hurts. My mom and I are closer now than we've been since I was a kid. We still argue. She's stubborn as hell. But there's mutual respect underneath it now. We're partners again. Last week, she told me she finally forgave herself. She said she used to see that $1,000 as the proof of her biggest failure. But now she sees it as the start of her second chance. And honestly, I couldn't agree more, so yeah. I guess this is the real ending. My mom's okay. I'm okay. The money's gone, but somehow, we both gained more than we lost. Perspective, humility, patience, and a weird kind of peace that only comes after you've already hit rock bottom and lived to tell the story. Stories number 7. Refusing to host family dinners. Even though I have the biggest house, I'm 36F and my husband Grant 38M, and I live in a 5-bedroom house just outside of Dallas. It's not a mansion or anything, but it's easily the biggest home in my family. We bought it after years of saving and moving around. I work as a nurse practitioner, and Grant owns a small but successful construction business. We don't have kids yet, but we host our share of gatherings, birthdays, football nights, and holidays, or at least we used to. That's where the problem started. My family has always been big on traditions, Sunday dinners, birthdays, and holidays. All of it was done together. And it was my mom, Diane, who always hosted. When she got older and moved into a smaller home after my dad passed, it made sense for someone else to take over. Naturally, all eyes turned to me. At first, I didn't mind. I thought it would be nice to have everyone together and that it'd make Mom happy. I hosted Thanksgiving, Christmas, a few birthdays. But the thing is, it wasn't hosting. It was catering a full event for 20-plus people who never lifted a finger. My older brother, Keith 41M, would show up with his wife, Amber, and their 2 kids. Always too busy to help. My younger sister, Lacey 34F, would roll in late with her boyfriend of the month, always making some dramatic entrance about her rough week. My mom would sit at the kitchen counter, telling stories about the old days. While I ran around trying to make sure everyone had a plate, the food was hot. And the kids didn't break anything. The worst part? Nobody ever cleaned up. After the first few dinners, I realized the help I was promised meant my mom rinsing one plate and saying, "You're such a good hostess, sweetheart." Meanwhile, I'd be elbow deep in dirty pans at midnight, scrubbing gravy off my table runner while my husband vacuumed confetti or crumbs. After Easter last year, I finally snapped. That day, Lacey spilled red wine on my white rug, laughed it off and said, "You can afford another one, right?" Amber let her kids paint at the table, actual acrylics, and I found blue smudges on my dining chairs later. Keith fell asleep on my couch after dinner, full plate still sitting on the coffee table. When everyone left, I just stood in the middle of my trashed kitchen and cried. Grant tried to help, but I told him to just go to bed. I stayed up until 2 a.m., cleaning and muttering to myself like a crazy person, so when my mom called a few days later to plan the next family dinner, I told her I was done. She laughed at first, thinking I was joking, but when she realized I meant it, she got quiet, sweetheart, she said. "You have the space. It just makes sense. Your father would have wanted the family to be together." I told her I understood, but it wasn't sustainable. I didn't enjoy it anymore. I was exhausted, and frankly, no one appreciated it. She sighed like I'd just told her I was selling a family heirloom. Then the calls started. Keith called, saying, "You're being selfish, Meg. It's just a few times a year." Amber texted me that I was alienating Mom and killing family traditions. Lacey went off on Facebook about how some people forget where they came from once they get a big house. I was livid. None of them offered to host. None offered to help. But suddenly, I was the villain for setting a boundary. So I didn't back down. I told everyone they were welcome to come over if it was a potluck. Everyone brought a dish and they helped clean up. No one agreed. My mom said, "That's not the same. You know your brother's not going to cook." Then Thanksgiving rolled around. Nobody made plans. Everyone assumed I'd cave, but I didn't. Grant and I went to a cabin in Oklahoma for the weekend. No cooking, no cleaning, just quiet. And that's when all hell broke loose. While we were gone, my mom decided to have a small family dinner at her house. Keith and Amber brought their kids. Lacey showed up apparently halfway through. My mom got emotional and said something about losing her family traditions. Lacey, of course, posted about it online. A picture of everyone around the table with the caption, "Even if not everyone shows up, family always finds a way." I won't lie. That one stung. It was petty, but it hurt. When we got back, I called my mom to check in, and she sounded distant. I tried to explain again that it wasn't about not wanting to be together. I just didn't want to be taken advantage of. But she said, "Honey, it's just dinner. You make everything so complicated." That broke something in me. For months I kept my distance. No Sunday dinners, no family birthdays. Just polite texts here and there. Then in February, my mom had a small health scare. Nothing major, but enough for everyone to panic and reunite. And of course, when she came home from the hospital, they all wanted to have a dinner to celebrate her recovery. Guess who they called first? Keith said, "Come on, Meg. You're really not going to make an exception for Mom?" I told him no. He lost it, saying I was cold and holding grudges. I told him if he wanted a dinner, he could host it. He said, "Our house is too small," I said. So was Mom's for 30 years, and she still made it work. Silence. Then he hung up. A week later, my mom called to apologize for how everyone had acted. She said she didn't realize how much pressure I'd been under, and that she should have supported me more. She even said she wanted to host something small herself, just the 5 of us, at her place. That dinner went perfectly. Everyone brought a dish. Everyone helped clean. No drama. It made me realize that sometimes, boundaries don't destroy families. They rebuild them. Piece by piece. Do things still feel a little tense? Yeah, Keith and Amber are still distant. Lacey's still making snarky comments, but Mom's been kinder. And even Grant said he's proud of me for standing my ground. I used to think saying no would make me the bad guy. Now I see it was the only way to stop being the family doormat. If hosting means being disrespected in my own home, I'd rather have dinner alone. Long update. It's been about 8 months since I drew that line in the sand and said, "No more family dinners at my house." I honestly thought time would smooth things over, that everyone would just adapt and realize it wasn't that big of a deal. But apparently boundaries don't sit well with people who benefited from you having none. It started again around early October. My brother Keith called me one evening while I was making dinner. His tone was all friendly at first, small talk about work, his kids, the Cowboys game. But I could hear the setup coming from a mile away. So, he finally said, dragging it out, Mom wants to do Thanksgiving with everyone this year. You know, like old times. I didn't say anything at first. Just kept stirring the sauce while Grant gave me this knowing look from across the kitchen. I could feel it coming. The guilt trip, the nostalgia, the emotional manipulation all bundled into one polite-sounding request. Keith continued, Mom's place is too small, and she's been having that back pain, so she can't really handle all the cooking and cleaning. It just makes sense for it to be at your place again. I'll even help this time, I nearly laughed. The last time Keith helped, he grilled 3 steaks, drank 6 beers, and then fell asleep on my couch. So I said, I appreciate the offer, but I'm sticking to what I said. I'm not hosting big dinners anymore. There was a long pause, and then the classic, wow, okay. Guess I'll tell Mom you just don't want to be with family anymore. That line, it's the one they always go for, and it always hits because deep down, I do miss the idea of those dinners. The laughter, the inside jokes, the chaos before it became resentment. But I know now that what I miss isn't real. It's a version of my family that never actually existed. Anyway, I told Keith, tell Mom I love her. But this isn't about not wanting to see anyone. I'll happily bring food to her house. He hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, I got a text from my mom. Honey, Keith told me you're not coming for Thanksgiving. Are you mad at me? That one actually hurt. I called her right away and explained everything again, like I've done a dozen times now. That I'll come. That I just don't want to host. But she sighed and said, it's just so hard without your father. You know he'd hate seeing the family so distant. I reminded her dad also used to get mad every time we left her to do everything alone. I remember him snapping more than once about nobody helping with dishes. He was always the one stacking plates while everyone else sat around gossiping. She went quiet after that and said, maybe we all could have done better. For a moment, I thought maybe she understood. But then came the kicker. Still, sweetheart, I wish you'd just do it this once. For me, and just like that, the guilt was back. I told Grant later that night, and he immediately said, we can't go back to that. You were miserable. He was right, the last time. I had panic attacks every time I heard my phone ding, thinking it was someone asking for another favor. So we made a decision. We'd host something small, but on our terms. We invited just Mom, Keith, Amber, and Lacey. No extended cousins, no kids running around. No 15 casseroles, just a simple dinner with strict rules. Everyone brings something, everyone helps clean, and nobody stays past 10 p.m. I even sent out a little group text explaining it politely, hoping it would set the tone. Keith never responded. Amber just sent a thumbs-up emoji. Lacey wrote, wow, sounds fun. Can't wait for the chore list. I ignored it. Thanksgiving came, and to my shock, everyone actually showed up on time. I made roasted chicken instead of turkey, mashed potatoes, and pie. Keith brought a store-bought salad. Amber brought cupcakes. Lacey brought a bottle of wine and that attitude of hers. Dinner started off fine. Small talk, laughter, even a few jokes about the old days. I started to think maybe we were finally turning a corner. But then, halfway through dessert, Lacey leaned back in her chair and said, you know, it's funny how Meg acts like this is such a big deal. Mom used to do dinners 10 times this size and never complained. I froze. The room went quiet before I could even respond. Grant said, calm as ever. Yeah, and that's why Meg's not repeating the same mistake. Lacey rolled her eyes. It's not a mistake to care about your family. That's when I lost it. I told her caring about family doesn't mean being their maid. That for years, I'd bent over backward trying to keep everyone happy while nobody noticed I was drowning. My mom got teary-eyed. Keith looked uncomfortable. And Lacey muttered something about me being dramatic. But Grant put his hand on my back, grounding me, and I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation. After that, everyone helped clean. Actually helped. Keith washed dishes, Amber wiped down counters, and Lacey, though grumbling, vacuumed. When they left, my mom hugged me and whispered, I see it now. You were right to stop. It took everything in me not to cry. Now it's been a few weeks since that dinner. And something unexpected happened. My mom invited everyone to her house for Christmas, and she said she'll order catering this year. Lacey complained that it's not the same, but I think that's progress. I told Mom I'd help her decorate instead of cook, and she seemed genuinely happy. For the first time in years, I feel like our family might finally be learning what real connection looks like. Not one person doing all the work, but everyone showing up in their own way. Boundaries didn't break us. They forced us to grow. Grant told me later that night, "You didn't just stop hosting. You taught them how to respect you." And honestly, that might be the most satisfying part of all. Final update. Christmas came faster than I expected. After the Thanksgiving dinner, things in the family were oddly calm. No passive-aggressive texts, no guilt calls from Mom, no sarcastic digs from Lacey, at least not at first. It was like everyone collectively exhaled after years of tension. But deep down, I knew my family too well to think the peace would last forever. About a week before Christmas, Mom called me. Her voice had that forced cheeriness she uses when she's trying to avoid conflict. "Honey," she started, "I decided to host Christmas this year. I'm so excited, the catering is booked and I'm keeping it simple." I smiled. "That sounds perfect, Mom. What can I bring?" "Just yourself," she said. "And maybe that apple pie you make. Everyone's still talking about it from Thanksgiving. That should have been my first red flag. Mom never says just yourself. It's always followed by something." Sure enough, 2 days later, Amber texted me, "Hey, Mom said since you're so good at organizing, can you handle the seating, decorations and music for Christmas Eve?" She's a little overwhelmed. I stared at my phone for a full minute before responding. "Amber, I thought Mom was catering everything this year." "She is," she replied. "But she just needs a bit of help making it feel festive." That phrase, a bit of help, might as well be my family's motto. I told her no, politely but firmly, that I'd be happy to bring my pie and some gifts, but I wasn't running the show this time. She left me on red when Christmas Eve came. Grant and I arrived around 6. Mom's house was warm, cozy, and, I'll admit, decorated beautifully. There were twinkling lights, poinsettias, and even the same ceramic village she used to set up when Dad was alive. I hugged her, and she looked genuinely happy. But then, I noticed something off. The kitchen counters were covered in half-unwrapped groceries. The dining table was cluttered with serving trays. The smell of food wasn't from catering. It was from the oven. "Mom," I asked gently, "where's the catered food?" She blinked, almost sheepish. "Oh, well, the catering company canceled last minute, so I decided to just throw something together." "It's no big deal," I looked at her. The flushed cheeks, the tired eyes, and I could tell she'd been cooking all day. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "Because you've done enough. I didn't want to ruin the progress we've made." Before I could respond, Lacey walked in, holding a glass of wine. "Progress? You mean Meg's anti-family campaign?" Grant tensed beside me. He muttered under his breath. "Here we go," Lacey smirked. "What?" "I'm just saying, every holiday feels different now. It's like everyone's scared to ask for help because Meg might set boundaries." She made air quotes like a teenager mocking her mom. I was about to say something, but Mom cut in. "Lacey, enough. That stunned everyone." Even Keith looked up from his phone. Mom continued. "Your sister has done more than enough for this family. We took advantage of her, and it's not happening again." Lacey scoffed. "Oh, come on, Mom. You're acting like she's some kind of martyr." That's when I finally spoke. "You don't get it, Lace. It's not about being a martyr. It's about respect. For years, I worked myself into the ground because I thought love meant saying yes, but it just made me resent all of you. I don't want that anymore. I want to enjoy my family, not dread them." For a long moment, nobody said anything. The only sound was the soft hum of Christmas music in the background. Then, out of nowhere, Keith said quietly, "She's right." Lacey frowned. "What?" Keith sighed and put his phone down. "I used to think Meg was being dramatic, but last month, Amber's parents asked us to host her cousin's baby shower. I thought, sure, no big deal, but it was hell. People trashed our place, no one helped, and everyone acted like it was expected." I finally understood what she meant. Lacey didn't reply, just stared at her wine glass like it had betrayed her. Dinner that night was simple but nice. Mom's food was amazing, and everyone actually pitched in to clean up afterward. Lacey helped wash dishes, though she did it with a silent, tight-lipped determination that said she wasn't ready to admit defeat. That's fine. I didn't need her to after dinner. We sat around the tree, exchanging gifts. Mom gave me a small wrapped box. Inside was a framed photo of all of us, from one of the old Christmas dinners. But this time she'd written something on the back. "Love doesn't mean doing everything. It means showing up. Together." I nearly cried. When we left that night, Grant said, "That felt Different, and it did. Not perfect. Never perfect. But real. Honest. A few weeks later, Mom called me again, this time just to talk. No guilt, no requests. She told me she was thinking about selling the house and downsizing to something smaller. I want less space, she said. Less to manage. Maybe that's how you felt all along. I smiled. Maybe. Then she said something that really stuck with me. You know, your father would be proud of you. You've got his backbone. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, letting the silence fill the space between us. The good kind of silence. Now, months later, we still do family dinners sometimes. Small, easy shared ones. We rotate houses. Sometimes we meet at restaurants. Sometimes it's just me, Mom, and Grant eating takeout and laughing about old times. The difference is, I don't feel like I'm carrying everyone anymore. Lacey softened too, surprisingly. She sent me a text a few weeks ago. I get it now. Sorry for being a jerk. I didn't need an apology, but it felt like closure. Looking back, setting that boundary was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Not because of the conflict, but because it meant changing the family dynamic that had been broken for decades. It meant risking being seen as selfish when really, I just wanted peace. And now, I have it. I'm no longer the host. The cleaner, the planner, the emotional glue. I'm just part of the family. And for the first time, that's enough. Stories number 8. When I asked my wife to stop blaming me for her pregnancy weight gain and everything fell apart, I 32 men have been married to my wife, Amanda 30F, for 5 years. We're expecting our first baby, a little boy, in a few months. I've always known pregnancy changes a woman's body. Emotions, everything, but I'll be honest. Nothing prepared me for how hard this would be on both of us. Amanda's pregnancy has been rough. She's had morning sickness that lasted all day. Back pain, swelling, exhaustion, all the usual stuff but magnified. She's also put on more weight than her doctor originally expected, and that's become a really sensitive topic in our house. She brings it up a lot. She'll grab at her sides or her thighs in front of the mirror and say things like, "This is all your fault," or "You did this to me." Sometimes it's said jokingly, but other times she's clearly upset. She'll say she hates how she looks, that she feels gross, and then direct it at me, like I'm the reason she's not comfortable in her body anymore. At first I tried to laugh it off or reassure her. I told her I thought she looked beautiful, that she's literally growing a human, and that I couldn't be more in awe of her. But the comments didn't stop. In fact, they started happening more often. A few nights ago, she was trying to get dressed for her sister's baby shower. Yes, her sister, who had her first baby last year. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Amanda tried on a bunch of outfits and got frustrated. She threw her maternity jeans across the room and started crying. I went over to comfort her and she just said, "You have no idea how much I hate you for this right now." That one stung. I said gently, "Babe, please don't say that. You know this isn't my fault." And she snapped, "Of course it's your fault. You got me pregnant. You don't have to deal with any of this. You get to stay the same while I blow up like a balloon." I didn't say anything for a while. I just rubbed her back and let her cry. But the next day, after another round of "this is your fault" jokes, half laughing, half serious, I finally said, "Amanda, can you please stop blaming me for your weight gain? It's starting to really hurt my feelings." She froze, then said, "Wow, your feelings are hurt? I'm the one whose body is falling apart." Then she stormed off. Since then, she's been distant. She'll still talk to me, but there's this coldness now. Like I've failed some unspoken test. I've been doing everything I can to help. Cooking healthy meals, cleaning, running errands, rubbing her feet when they're swollen. You name it, but no matter what I do, she seems angry with me. A few days later, she vented to her mom about it, I know, because I overheard them talking on FaceTime. Her mom, Carol, said something like, "Honey, he's a man. They never understand what we go through. Don't take it personally." Then Amanda said, "He just doesn't get how much this has changed everything. I don't even feel like me anymore. I get it, I really do. I know this isn't about vanity. It's about her body not feeling like her own anymore. And I can't pretend to fully understand that. But I also don't think it's fair that she keeps taking it out on me." This morning was another tough one. I was making breakfast, and she came into the kitchen wearing my hoodie. She sighed and said, "You probably wish I looked like I used to." I told her, "No, I don't. I wish you could see what I see. You're beautiful. Even now." She rolled her eyes and said, "You have to say that. I didn't push it." But I felt that lump in my throat again. I love her so much. And I know this is all temporary. The hormones, the emotions, the discomfort. But the thing that scares me is how angry she seems lately. It's not just about her body. It's like she resents me for being normal, like she's suffering and I'm not. And that somehow makes me the enemy. I've talked to her doctor privately once, just to ask if what she's experiencing is typical. The doctor said that emotional swings and self-image issues are very common, and to just be patient, supportive, and consistent. I'm trying. But I feel like I'm running out of ways to be kind without being a punching bag. Last night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and she wasn't in bed. I found her sitting in the nursery, crying quietly. I sat down next to her and she said, "I'm scared you won't love me after this. What if I never look like myself again?" That broke me. I told her, "Amanda, I didn't marry your body, I married you. You're the same person I fell in love with, even if you never lose a single pound." She didn't say anything, just leaned into me and cried until she fell asleep on my shoulder. This morning, things were calmer. She actually thanked me for being patient, but I can still feel the tension, the unspoken weight, no pun intended, between us. I just don't know if I was wrong to say what I said. That I didn't want her to keep blaming me. I don't want to sound insensitive, but I also need her to stop projecting her frustration onto me. She's the love of my life. I just hope she knows that even on her worst days, I'm still in her corner, even when it feels like she's pushing me out. Update. Hey everyone, it's been a little over 6 months since I posted. I wasn't expecting my original post to get the kind of attention it did, but honestly, the advice and empathy I got from so many of you helped me through one of the hardest stretches of my life. So, here's where we are now. Amanda gave birth to our son Noah in mid-May. The delivery was complicated, not life-threatening, but tough. She had a long labor, and there were a few scary moments where the doctors had to intervene because Noah's heart rate was dropping. Everything turned out okay, thank God, but it left Amanda shaken. She lost a lot of blood and had to stay in the hospital for a few extra days. When we finally got home, everything felt different, beautiful, yes, but also heavy. Amanda was exhausted all the time. I mean, of course. Newborn life is brutal, but it was more than that. She barely ate, barely slept. I'd catch her just staring off while rocking Noah, like she wasn't really there. I suggested she talk to her doctor about postpartum depression, but she brushed it off, said she was just tired. Meanwhile, I tried to pick up as much slack as I could. Diapers, bottles, laundry, everything. I was running on fumes too, but I didn't care. I just wanted her to feel okay again. Then came the day she broke down completely. It was around 4 a.m. Noah had been fussy all night, and I offered to take over so she could sleep. She said no, that I always do it wrong. I told her she needed rest, that I had it handled, and she snapped, "I can't even look at myself in the mirror without crying, and you want to handle it? You think making a bottle makes you super dad?" That one hurt. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how broken she looked saying them. We both ended up crying that night. She told me she didn't feel like herself anymore, that she felt like her body was ruined and that she couldn't understand why I still wanted to touch her. She said she hated that I didn't seem to struggle the same way, and in that moment, I realized something important. She wasn't angry at me, she was angry for herself. Angry that her body had changed, that her life had been rewritten overnight, that the person she used to be felt like a stranger. The next morning, I called her OB's office myself. I told them I was worried she might have postpartum depression. They scheduled her for a checkup the next day. That was the beginning of the turning point. Her doctor was gentle and honest with her. They confirmed what I suspected. She was dealing with postpartum depression and anxiety. She started therapy and later began a low-dose medication. It took a few weeks to notice a difference, but little by little, she started coming back to herself. We also started doing something her therapist suggested. Every night after Noah goes to bed, we sit down for 15 minutes. No phones, no distractions, and talk, sometimes about serious stuff, sometimes just about random things. Some nights she still cries, some nights we laugh, but it's become our thing, a small piece of connection in the chaos. One night, about a month ago, she said something that floored me. "I used to resent you for not being miserable like I was, but now I realize I needed you to be the stable one. I needed you to hold the ground while I figured out how to stand again. That's when I lost it. Because for months, I'd been walking on eggshells, trying to do everything right. But it finally felt like she saw me again. Physically, she's still not fully comfortable in her body, but she's working on it. She started going on walks with the stroller, then joined a postpartum yoga class with her sister. Rachel, she's eating better, sleeping a bit more. And she even laughed the other day when she put on jeans that actually fit again. The best part? She doesn't make those "you did this to me" jokes anymore. Every once in a while she'll tease me, like when Noah spits up on me and she says, "See? Now you're sharing the pain." But it's playful now, not bitter. I know we're not the same couple we were before pregnancy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've both changed, grown, I guess. I've learned patience I didn't know I was capable of. She's learned to let me in when she's struggling instead of pushing me away. The other night, she came out of the shower, looked at herself in the mirror, and said softly, "I'm starting to look like me again." Then she looked at me and added, "Thank you for not giving up on me when I didn't look like me." I told her I never saw her as anything but beautiful. We've still got work to do. Therapy, communication, balancing parenthood and marriage. But we're finally on the same team again. And for anyone reading this who's about to be a parent, be kind to each other. Pregnancy and postpartum can test even the strongest relationship. But if you lead with empathy and love, even when it's hard, you'll find your way back. Final update. It's been just over a year since I first posted about Amanda and me. Our son Noah just turned 1 last week. We threw him a little birthday party in our backyard. Nothing fancy, just family, a few close friends, and too much cake. But while I was watching Amanda laugh with Noah on her hip, frosting smeared on both their faces, I realized how far we've come from that first post. From the nights of resentment, exhaustion, and guilt that almost broke us, the months after the second update weren't perfect. I think people online sometimes assume healing happens in a straight line, that therapy fixes things quickly, or that time automatically makes you grateful. But in real life, it's a lot messier than that. Amanda had good weeks and bad weeks. There were mornings she woke up smiling, talking about meal plans and weekend plans, and other mornings she barely spoke a word. I learned that the best thing I could do was listen, not fix. That was hard for me. I'm a problem solver by nature. But sometimes love means shutting up and sitting in the mess with someone. Around Noah's 6-month mark, Amanda started seeing her old self peek through. She laughed more easily. She'd dance around the kitchen again when music came on. She started sketching again. She's an incredible artist, but hadn't drawn since early in her pregnancy. I found one of her sketchbooks open one morning, and she'd drawn me holding Noah. I don't think I've ever cried so quietly in my life. We also started couples therapy, not because things were falling apart, but because we wanted to make sure we were actually learning from what we'd gone through. That decision turned out to be huge. Our therapist, Dr. Martin, didn't pull punches. He made us talk about things we'd both avoided, like resentment, guilt, and sex. There was one session that hit especially hard. Amanda admitted she had spent the first few months after giving birth thinking I didn't find her attractive anymore, that every time I hesitated before hugging her because I didn't want to hurt her incision or make her uncomfortable, she interpreted it as rejection. I told her the truth. I was terrified of doing the wrong thing, of adding even a sliver more pressure. We both cried that day, but it felt cleansing, like we were finally talking about what was real, not what we thought the other person wanted to hear. Since then, we've both changed in quiet but significant ways. Amanda's confidence came back slowly, like the tide coming in after a storm. She started running again, not to get her body back, but because she said she missed feeling strong. She even signed up for a local 5K a few months ago, when she crossed the finish line. Noah and I were holding a little sign that said, "Go Mommy." She cried when she saw it, and me. I've learned that partnership during parenthood isn't about who does more. It's about who shows up, consistently, even when it's hard, even when you're tired. I've learned that sometimes loving someone means standing steady while they break, and sometimes it means letting yourself be vulnerable when they're strong enough to hold you. We've had a few tough conversations with family too. Her mom, Linda, apologized for some of the body comments she'd made during Amanda's pregnancy. She admitted she hadn't realized how damaging they were. That moment of accountability meant a lot to Amanda. She cried in her mom's arms afterward. We've also found new joy in little things. Our Friday night no phones, no TV rule stuck. It started as therapy homework, but turned into something sacred. Sometimes we play cards, sometimes we talk, sometimes we just sit together while Noah sleeps. There's something grounding about that kind of stillness. And for anyone who followed my first post about the jokes Amanda made blaming me for her pregnancy, those are gone, completely. Once in a while she'll say something like, "You and your swimmers really changed my life." But it's with a wink, not venom. We even laugh about how that whole thing turned into a turning point for us. Last month, she told me she's ready for another baby someday. Not now, maybe not soon, but someday. I didn't push. Just smiled and told her we'll get there when we're ready. That felt huge, like a full circle moment. The truth is, that fight, the one that started this whole story, wasn't really about weight or hormones or blame. It was about fear. We were both terrified of change, of losing ourselves, of not being enough for each other. But fear disguised as anger can do real damage if you don't face it together. Now we do. I look at Amanda and Noah and feel this deep, quiet gratitude that we didn't give up when things got dark. We fought for each other, not against each other. And even though parenthood still knocks us flat sometimes, we've learned how to fall without breaking apart. So, if anyone's reading this in the middle of that same kind of chaos, if your partner is angry, sad, distant, or not the person you remember, please don't assume it means love is gone. Sometimes it just means love needs a little more patience. That's our story now, messy, imperfect, and absolutely worth it. And for the record, Amanda looks more beautiful to me now than the day we met. Stories number 9. She wants her old room back. But it's not hers anymore. When I married my husband, Paul, I knew blending families wouldn't be easy. He had a daughter from his first marriage, Emily, who was 11 at the time. And I had a son, Ryan, who was 9. Paul and his ex-wife, Laura, had divorced a few years before we met, and their custody arrangement was pretty standard. Emily spent the school year with her mom in Ohio and came to stay with us for most holidays and 6 weeks during the summer. When Paul and I bought our house, we made sure there was space for both kids to have their own rooms. It mattered to me that Emily felt like this was her home too, not just a place she visited. I painted her room yellow, her favorite color, and we picked out furniture together. She helped choose the decorations, fairy lights, bookshelves, a huge corkboard where she pinned drawings, photos, and little mementos from school. It looked like any other teenage girl's room, and she loved it. For a few years, things were fine. Emily and Ryan didn't fight much, though they weren't exactly close. They had different personalities. She was quiet and creative, while Ryan was loud and into sports, but they respected each other. I'd even say they got along better than most step-siblings. Then, a couple of years ago, things started changing. Emily hit high school, got busier with friends, and started spending more time at her mom's. When COVID hit, she stopped coming at all for almost 2 years because travel between states was such a hassle. She FaceTimed Paul every week, but the physical visits just stopped. In the meantime, Ryan grew up. His room was smaller, and by the time he turned 15, he was almost too big for his bed. He also got into music. He played guitar and drums, and it was getting impossible to fit everything in that tiny space. One night, Paul and I talked about maybe switching rooms around, and he suggested Emily's old room since she hadn't been there in ages. I hesitated. I wanted to keep her room the same, at least as a gesture that she still belonged here. But Paul said, "Honey, she's almost 17. She barely visits. It's not fair to keep a whole room unused when Ryan could actually use it." And, honestly, he wasn't wrong. So last year, we decided to give the bigger room to Ryan. I made him promise to treat it respectfully, since it had been Emily's. We packed up her stuff carefully, posters, photos, books, even a stuffed bear she used to sleep with, and stored them all in labeled boxes in the attic. Then we repainted the room gray and turned part of it into a mini music studio for Ryan. When Emily came to visit this summer for the first time since 2019, she walked into the house and froze. The moment she saw the door to her old room open and noticed Ryan's drum set inside, her whole face fell. She didn't yell right away, but she asked, "Why is Ryan in my room?" Paul and I explained the situation as gently as we could, that since she hadn't been here in so long, we thought it made sense for Ryan to use the space. She got quiet, nodded, and went to the guest room. I thought she'd cool off, but she barely spoke to us for the next 2 days. On the 3rd day, she finally exploded. She said, "You took away the only part of this house that was mine." She accused me of never wanting her to feel at home, and said I clearly favored my son. I tried to tell her we'd kept all her stuff safe, and she could still decorate the guest room however she wanted. But she wasn't having it. She said, "That's not the same. You can't just replace my room." Paul tried to talk to her, but he's not great at emotional conversations. He said, "Emily, you barely came here for years. It's not like we kicked you out." That only made it worse. She packed her things early and went back to her mom's before her visit was even over. Laura, her mom, called me a few days later. She said Emily was really hurt and that we'd handled things coldly. She told me that, whether Emily visited often or not, that room was still supposed to be hers. She said we made her daughter feel like an outsider in her dad's home. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to defend myself, but another part felt guilty. I kept thinking back to the look on Emily's face when she saw the drums. Since then, she's barely spoken to Paul. He's called and texted, but her replies are short, polite, and distant. He's trying to give her space, but it's eating him up inside. Ryan, for his part, feels awful. He even offered to switch back, but I told him that wouldn't solve anything. It would just make everyone feel worse. The thing is, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I honestly thought it was the practical choice. I didn't think a room that had gone unused for almost 3 years would matter so much, but maybe I underestimated how much that space symbolized her connection to us. To her dad, to this family. Sometimes, when I go into the guest room, I notice the little touches she's added. Photos taped to the mirror. A new comforter she brought from home. It looks nice, but not lived in, not hers. I've tried reaching out, even sent her a handwritten letter apologizing for how we handled things. I told her she's always welcome here, and that no matter what, this house is her home too. I don't know if she believed me. Paul keeps saying she'll come around eventually. That teenage emotions run hot but fade. I hope he's right, but I can't shake the feeling that we might have permanently damaged something we didn't even realize was fragile. I just wish we could go back and find a way to make space for both kids, physically and emotionally, without making either of them feel like they were losing ground. Now, every time I walk past Ryan's room and hear him practicing guitar, I can't help but think of those fairy lights and the corkboard full of Emily's old memories. The house feels quieter somehow, even with the noise. It's been about 4 months since that whole thing with Emily blew up, and honestly, I've spent a lot of that time replaying the moment she saw her old room. I can still picture the way she froze in the doorway, her mouth slightly open like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. It's strange how a single moment can stick in your head like that. Paul's been struggling too, though he's better at hiding it. He's been calling Emily every Sunday, and sometimes she answers, but it's never for long. The conversations are short, polite, and painfully surface level. She'll ask how work is going, how Ryan's doing, and then she'll find an excuse to hang up. He tries to keep his voice upbeat, but after each call, I can see the way his shoulders drop when he puts the phone down. I asked him once if he thought we should have handled it differently. He sighed and said, "Maybe, but what's done is done." He's not the type to dwell on things, but I can tell it's bothering him more than he lets on. Ryan feels caught in the middle. He didn't ask for any of this, and he's tried to make things better in his own way. A couple of weeks ago, he cleared out one corner of his room and set up a little desk area for Emily. He told me, if she comes to visit, she can use it for drawing or homework or whatever. He even put up one of her old art prints above the desk. He didn't tell her about it. He just said he wanted her to see it for herself someday. That broke my heart a little. The part that's been hardest for me, though, is that Laura still won't let this go. She called again last month, this time more direct. She told Paul that Emily refuses to come for Christmas unless we make things right. When he asked what that meant, Laura said Emily wants her room back. That was the first time I really lost my composure. I told Paul there was no way we were undoing everything again. Ryan's finally comfortable, settled, and doing well in school. His grades have gone up. He's practicing music every day, and he's even made a few new friends who come over to jam with him. I said, we can't just take all that away because Emily feels nostalgic. Paul didn't argue, but I could tell he was torn. He wants his daughter back in his life, and I get that. But I also feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, trying to make everyone happy and failing at it. 2 weeks ago, something unexpected happened. Emily called me, not her dad, me. It caught me off guard because we hadn't spoken directly since that day she left. She sounded nervous, but calm. She said she'd been thinking a lot about what happened and admitted that she overreacted a bit. Then she said, I know I don't live there, but it just felt like you erased me. That hit me hard. I told her I understood, that I hadn't realized how much that room meant to her. She said it wasn't about the room itself, but about losing her space at her dad's house. She said, when you grow up between 2 homes, you need somewhere that feels like it's really yours. Not borrowed, not temporary. I told her that made total sense, and that if she wanted, we could redecorate the guest room together. Make it feel more like her space. She hesitated but agreed. So next weekend, she's actually coming to stay with us for a few days to do just that. Ryan's excited but also nervous. He asked me, do you think she's still mad at me? I told him no. but I'm not sure he believes me. He's been practicing extra quietly lately, almost like he doesn't want her to think he's rubbing it in that he got her old room. Paul's trying to stay optimistic. He's been cleaning the garage, cooking her favorite meals, even fixing the old bookshelf from her room to put in the guest room. He won't admit it, but I know he's desperate for things to go back to normal. I've been thinking a lot about how easy it is for adults to underestimate the emotional side of things when it comes to kids. Even teenagers. We get caught up in what's practical, space, schedules, money, and forget how much meaning they attach to things that seem small to us. For Emily, that yellow-painted room wasn't just four walls. It was the one thing that stayed the same while her parents divorced, remarried, and built new lives. I guess we took that stability away without realizing it. I'm hopeful about her visit, but also nervous. I want her to feel welcome again, not just as a guest, but as part of the family. I already bought new bedding in a color she picked, teal, and Paul's framing one of her drawings to hang above the bed. Part of me worries that no matter how much we try, it won't feel the same to her, but maybe that's okay. Maybe what matters isn't recreating what used to be, but building something new that she still feels connected to. I'm planning to apologize again in person. Not the generic sorry you felt that way kind, but a real one. I want her to know that she's not forgotten, and she never was. Maybe this will finally start to heal the distance between all of us. Maybe she'll see that this house isn't just mine or Paul's or Ryan's. It's still hers too, just in a different way, if nothing else. I hope she feels that when she walks in this time, she doesn't see a stranger's space. I hope she sees a home that still has room for her, even if it's not the same room as before. It's been almost 6 months since Emily came to stay that weekend, and I can honestly say it changed things more than I expected. Not just for her, but for all of us. When she first showed up, I could tell she was nervous. She parked her little silver car out front, sat in it for a good 5 minutes, then finally came up to the door with that awkward half-smile she used to have as a kid, when she wasn't sure if she was in trouble. Paul practically ran to open the door, like he was afraid she'd change her mind and drive off. The first night was quiet. We made tacos, her favorite, and talked about small things, school, her art projects, her roommate, the weather. It wasn't until after dinner, when Ryan showed her the new setup in the guest room, that things started to shift. He had gone all out. He cleaned, hung her framed drawings, put a plant by the window, and left a note on the desk that said, "Welcome home." She didn't say much at first, just kind of stared around the room, ran her fingers over the edge of the desk, and then looked at Ryan and said, "Thanks, kid." He grinned so wide you'd think she'd handed him a trophy. That night, I heard her and Paul talking in the kitchen long after I went to bed. The next morning, I came down to find them sitting at the table, coffee mugs in hand, looking exhausted but peaceful. Paul told me later they'd talked for hours, about the divorce, about how she'd felt pushed aside, about how we'd unintentionally made her feel like a guest instead of family. He said he apologized, genuinely and completely. Emily told me later she didn't expect to forgive him right away, but that hearing him actually own it made her feel like she could start trying. The rest of that weekend was surprisingly easy. She helped me cook, teased Ryan, even took the dog for a walk. She asked me questions about my work for the first time, and we laughed about how awkward we both were when Paul and I first started dating. It felt like we'd all exhaled at the same time. By Sunday, when she packed up to leave, she said something that stuck with me. "I don't think I need my old room anymore," she said. "I just needed to know I still had a place here." It hit me harder than I expected, because that's really what it was about all along. Not the paint, not the furniture, not the space. It was about belonging. A few weeks later, she came back again, this time just to hang out. Then again after that. It's become kind of a routine now, every few weekends. She drives up, spends the night, and we all have dinner together. She and Ryan have started working on music together. She sings, he plays guitar, and they even uploaded a few covers online. Paul looks lighter these days. He doesn't check his phone every few hours waiting for her to text. She actually calls now, sometimes just to chat. Watching the two of them rebuild their bond has been one of the most quietly emotional things I've seen. There was one small, almost silly thing that made me realize how far we'd come. Last month, when she came to visit, she opened the fridge and said, "You still keep my oat milk stocked?" And I told her, "Of course, you live here sometimes, remember?" She smiled and said, "Yeah, I guess I do." I don't think we'll ever erase that rough patch completely. Those feelings of resentment, guilt, and distance, they don't just disappear, but we've learned how to handle them better. I learned that sometimes doing the logical thing can still hurt someone deeply. That emotions don't follow the same rules as practicality. And I learned that being a stepmom isn't about proving you're right. It's about learning when to listen and when to simply be there. Last week, Emily sent me a text out of the blue. It said, "Thanks for not giving up on me." I just stared at it for a while, smiling like an idiot, because for the first time in a long time, I feel like our family finally found its balance again. Not the version I imagined years ago, but one that feels real, earned, and peaceful. If you'd told me a year ago that we'd all be laughing over dinner, teasing each other, and actually enjoying time together again, I probably wouldn't have believed it, but here we are. The house feels fuller now, not because of rooms or furniture, but because of connection, and that's something I wouldn't trade for anything. Stories number 10. My older sister has been ignoring me for a decade now, and I still have no idea why. I'm 29 now, and my sister, Emily, is 34. We grew up in a small town in Ohio, and for most of my childhood, she was my favorite person in the world. She was the kind of big sister who used to braid my hair before school, share her clothes even though Mom said not to, and sneak me snacks when I cried because I didn't want to eat vegetables. She was my protector, my safe person, but then she wasn't. It started subtly. Like a slow fade, I was 18, just about to graduate high school, and Emily had recently gotten engaged to her college boyfriend. Ryan. She was living 2 hours away in Columbus, and I looked up to her so much that I'd go visit whenever I could. But around that time, her texts started coming less often. She'd take longer to reply. She'd sound distant, distracted. When I asked if I'd done something wrong, she'd brush it off. "No, sweetie, I've just been busy. Don't worry about it." But then, after her wedding, something shifted completely. At the reception, I remember trying to get a photo with her. She hugged everyone, aunts, cousins, friends. But when it was my turn, she smiled like I was a coworker. Quick and polite, I laughed it off, figuring she was just tired or overwhelmed, but after that day, she just stopped talking to me. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first, I thought maybe I was overthinking it. I tried reaching out a few times, birthdays, holidays, random check-ins. Sometimes she'd respond with a short thanks or a thumbs-up emoji. Other times, nothing at all. Then, one Thanksgiving, when I was 21, she didn't show up. Mom said she and Ryan were staying home this year. When I asked why, Mom's expression flickered. "I'm not sure," she said. "Maybe you should call her." I did. She didn't answer. That was 8 years ago. I've replayed everything in my head so many times trying to figure out what I did wrong. Did I say something at her wedding? Was it something stupid from when we were kids? Did she overhear me talking about her behind her back? I didn't, but I can't help but question myself sometimes. I even reached out to Ryan once about 5 years ago. I found him on Facebook and sent a polite message. "Hey Ryan, I hope you're both doing well. I've been trying to reach Emily for a while and can't seem to get through. I'm worried. Can you let her know I'd love to talk?" He read it, never replied. That silence hit harder than I expected. For years, my mom has tried to stay neutral about it. She used to say, "You know how your sister can be. She needs space." Or, "Maybe she'll come around eventually." But lately, even she started to sound resigned. The last time we talked about it, she sighed and said, "I don't know what happened between you two. Honey, she doesn't talk about it. Every time I bring your name up, she changes the subject." That hurt more than I can explain. Because if she's changing the subject, it means she remembers. It means she's choosing not to talk about me. Meanwhile, I've built my life. New city, new job, new friends. I've had relationships, heartbreaks, big moments, all without her. When I bought my first car, I wanted to text her. When I graduated college, I looked for her in the crowd. Like some part of me still believed she'd show up, even when I got engaged to my fiancé, Matt. I hesitated to post about it online because I knew she'd see it and scroll right past. She still follows me on social media. By the way, she doesn't interact, but she watches my stories. I see her little circle at the top of the viewer list. Every single time. It's this twisted kind of ghosting, where she's not gone, but she's definitely not here either. The weirdest part is, our parents haven't had a falling out with her. She still calls them, visits sometimes, sends gifts for holidays, but never with my name on them. It's like she surgically removed me from her life and kept everything else. 2 years ago, Mom was in the hospital for a few days with pneumonia. When Emily came to visit, Mom told me to come too, thinking it would be good for both of you. I didn't even hesitate. I just drove over, shaking, rehearsing what I'd say. When I got there, Emily was sitting by Mom's bed, reading a magazine. Her hair was shorter than I remembered. She looked older, more serious. When she saw me, her face froze. "Hi," I said softly. "Hey," she replied, eyes dropping back to the magazine. That was it. Mom tried to bridge the gap. "Isn't this nice? My girls together again." Neither of us said anything. After about 20 minutes, I left the room to grab coffee. And when I came back, Emily was gone. Mom told me later that Emily said she had to get back home. No explanation. I cried the entire drive home. That was the last time I saw her in person. Last month, I got a call from my cousin Laura. She said she ran into Emily at Target, and apparently, Emily has a 3-year-old daughter now. I didn't even know she'd had a baby, Laura said. Emily looked good, tired, but happy, and that she mentioned keeping her circle small these days. Laura asked if I wanted her to pass along a message, and I told her no, because honestly, I don't know if I can handle being ignored again. I've gone through every possible emotion with this. Anger, guilt, sadness, confusion. I've written letters I never sent. I've dreamed about her apologizing, or finally explaining, or even yelling at me just so I'd know. But the silence is worse than any fight could have been. Even Matt doesn't really know how to comfort me about it. He's met my parents and cousins, but not Emily, he said. Maybe she's dealing with something she can't tell you about. And maybe that's true. But after 10 years, that explanation starts to feel hollow. You know what's strange? Sometimes, I'll still see something, like a shirt she would have loved, or a TikTok that reminds me of an inside joke we had. And for a split second, I'll reach for my phone to send it to her. Then I remember I can't. It's like grieving someone who's still alive. Mom says I should keep the door open. But the truth is, the door's been open this whole time. She's the one who won't walk through it. A few weeks ago, I got a Facebook memory notification. A picture of me and Emily from 2010. We were laughing, covered in frosting from baking cupcakes, and she had her arm around me like she'd never let go. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then, for the first time in years, I sent her a message. Just one line. "Hey Em, I still miss you. I hope you're happy." She saw it. No reply. And honestly, I think that was the moment I finally understood that closure might never come. That sometimes people walk away, and you'll never know why. But even now, even after a decade of silence, if she called me tomorrow, I'd answer, because she's still my sister. And part of me, the stupid, hopeful part, will always be waiting. Long update. It's been a few weeks since I sent that message to Emily. I haven't heard a word back, and honestly, I wasn't expecting to. Part of me hoped for a reply, even a short, cold one. But the silence has settled over me in a way that feels familiar now, like an old blanket I've been carrying for years. I decided to focus on myself instead. I threw myself into work, trying to make my little corner of the world feel full and alive even if she wasn't in it. Matt has been supportive, but he keeps asking if I've considered professional help to process the grief. I keep telling him I'm fine, but I think we both know I'm not. Then, last Sunday, I got a call from Mom. She sounded hesitant, the kind of hesitant that makes you know she's been holding something back. "Meg," she said softly. "Emily called me yesterday." My stomach dropped. "She did?" Mom continued. "She didn't leave a message, but she asked me how you were." I froze. I couldn't breathe for a moment. After 10 years of nothing, the first sign of movement, however small, was like a jolt straight to the chest. Mom went on. "She sounded nervous. I think she wants to reach out, but she doesn't know how." I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking. "Why now?" I asked. "Why after all these years?" Mom sighed. "I don't know, but I think she's dealing with some stuff, big stuff. I just thought you should know." I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced with every possible scenario. Did she resent me? Was she scared of something I'd done? Or had life simply swallowed her in a way that made her disappear? The next morning, I sent her another message. More direct this time. "Emily, I know it's been a long time. I don't know why we've been apart. I just want to know if we can talk. I miss you." I didn't know if she'd see it. I didn't know if she'd reply, but I sent it anyway. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. I got a text from an unknown number. "Meg, it's Emily. I don't know where to start. Can we talk?" I dropped everything. I called immediately. Her voice was trembling on the other end. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't even know if you remember why I shut down." Tears welled in my eyes. "I've tried to figure it out for 10 years. Please, just tell me." Emily took a shaky breath. After my wedding, I felt like you were competing with me. I know it sounds crazy. I thought you were upset that I was moving on with my life, getting married, leaving home. I misinterpreted things, Meg. And then, I just froze. I didn't know how to fix it. And every time I thought about reaching out, I got scared you'd be angry. I couldn't speak for a moment. 10 years of silence, 10 years of wondering. All because of a misunderstanding I had no idea even existed. I'm not angry, Em, I finally said, my voice cracking. I wanted you back. I wanted my sister back. I want that too, she whispered. I've missed you so much, and I know it's too late to fix all the lost years. But I want to try, if you'll let me. I felt a weight lift from my chest that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. Of course I'll let you, I said. I've been waiting for this call for 10 years. We talked for hours that night. She explained more about why she pulled away. Her insecurities, her fear of hurting me, her guilt over leaving me behind in Ohio while she moved on. I shared my years of confusion, my sadness, and my fear that she'd abandoned me completely. By the end of the call, we were laughing, crying, and remembering all the little things from our childhood. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There's still so much to talk about, so much to understand, but it's a start. After a decade of silence, we're finally talking. Emily even suggested a visit next month. She wants to come see me, and she promised to bring her daughter, who I've never met. I don't know how that will feel. Meeting her niece for the first time after years of estrangement. But I know it's going to be part of the healing. For the first time in 10 years, I feel hope that our relationship can be rebuilt, that the years of silence don't have to define us, that my sister, the person I loved and lost, can come back into my life. I still have a lot of emotions to process, and I know it won't all be smooth sailing. But after 10 years of unanswered questions and aching for my sister, just hearing her voice again, hearing that she wants me back too, is more than I could have asked for the first time in a decade. I feel like the gap between us is starting to close. Final update: it's been almost a month since Emily reached out, the day she arrived at my apartment. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness I hadn't felt in years. Matt came with me to pick her up from the train station, partly to meet her, partly for moral support. I kept telling myself, it's just Emily. She's still your sister. Don't psych yourself out. When she stepped off the train, I barely recognized her. She looked older, more serious. But the same Emily I remembered was there too. The one who would twirl her hair when she was thinking, the one who always laughed at her own bad jokes. Her little daughter, Chloe, clung to her hand. Eyes wide and curious, Meg? Emily's voice was tentative. I ran toward her and hugged her so tightly that I could feel her trembling. Em, I can't believe you're here, I whispered. I know, she said, voice catching. I was scared this would be weird. I wasn't sure if you'd even want to see me. I laughed through my tears. Do you think I'd wait 10 years to see my sister? Come on. Chloe peeked around Emily's legs and I crouched down. Hi, I'm Meg. I think we're going to be friends. She smiled shyly, and just like that, the ice broke. We spent the first few hours in my apartment, catching up on the past decade. Emily explained everything, the miscommunications, her insecurities, and how guilty she felt for shutting me out. I shared how lonely I'd felt, how much I'd wondered what I'd done wrong, and how I never stopped hoping she'd come back. We cried, we laughed, and we reminisced about childhood memories that made us both smile through tears. Matt watched us from the couch, occasionally chiming in with a joke to break up the tension. I realized I hadn't laughed like that in years. Not just the laugh of relief, but the genuine, connected laugh of being with someone who knows you inside and out. After dinner, Emily and I sat on the balcony with glasses of wine while Chloe napped. I asked her the question I'd been holding back for so long. Why didn't you just tell me? Why keep me at a distance all these years? Emily's eyes filled with tears. I was scared, Meg. I thought if I admitted I was upset or insecure, you'd be angry. Or worse, disappointed in me. And the more time passed, the harder it became. I got stuck in this pattern of avoidance. I didn't want to hurt you, but I ended up hurting you anyway. And I've regretted it every day. I reached for her hand. I get it, Em. And I forgive you, but you need to know. Missing you. Worrying about you. Hoping you'd come back. That was really hard, really lonely, but I missed you every single day. She squeezed my hand. I missed you too. Chloe even asks about you sometimes. I tell her about her crazy fun aunt who taught me how to braid my hair. We laughed, and it felt like we were stitching together the years we lost. Thread by thread, over the next few days, we went through photo albums, visited my parents, and introduced Chloe to our extended family. Emily and I talked about boundaries, about being honest with each other, and about not letting misunderstandings fester again. It wasn't perfect. Some old wounds still ached, but we were both willing to try. The moment that really struck me happened on the last night of her visit. We were sitting on the couch, Chloe asleep between us, and Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "Meg," she whispered, "thank you for not giving up on me." Even after all these years, I hugged her tighter. I could never give up on my sister, never. As she left to go back home, I felt a pang of sadness. 10 years of distance had taught me that reunions are always temporary, but also a deep, unshakable hope. We'd started rebuilding something that had been broken for a decade. It wasn't just words, it was action, effort, and love finally finding its way back. I know there will still be difficult days, awkward conversations, and moments where the past will surface. But for the first time in 10 years, I feel like my sister is really in my life again. Emily isn't just a memory, a ghost of my childhood. She's here, and this time she's not leaving. Sometimes I catch myself looking at her texts and smiling at a little Chloe anecdote, or replaying one of our silly inside jokes. And I realize, after all the pain, confusion, and years of wondering why, the most important thing isn't why it happened. It's that it's happening now. We're talking, laughing, rebuilding, and for the first time, the silence isn't a wall between us anymore. It's just a chapter that's finally closed. Stories number 11. When I was 14, I became best friends with my prank caller. I don't really know what made me think of this story tonight. Maybe it's the way everything feels too connected lately. Like every random thing in life ties back to something that happened years ago. Maybe it's because I just got off the phone with her again after so long. Whatever it is, I figured I'd tell the story of how one of the strangest, funniest, most unexpected friendships of my life started when I was just a bored 14-year-old girl who picked up the phone on a random summer night. This was back in 2007, back when having your own landline in your room felt like a luxury. My parents, Carla and Tom, were old school about phones. They didn't like cell phones for kids, said they were a distraction. So I had this clunky beige cordless phone that only worked half the time and made static noises when you stood near the window. One night, I was lying on my bed, doodling in my notebook when the phone rang. It was almost 10 p.m., and my mom had gone to bed already. So I answered quickly, "Hello?" There was silence at first. Then a voice said, "Is your refrigerator running?" I groaned. It was so cliché. "Wow, original," I said. "You got that from a 1950s joke book?" There was a pause. Then the person on the other end laughed. Not just a snicker. A full, genuine laugh. "You're not supposed to ruin it," she said, still giggling. And that was how I first met Lindsay. She told me later she was 15, lived 2 towns over, and got my number off one of those random dial sites online. She'd been making prank calls with her cousin and thought I sounded like someone who wouldn't hang up right away. Which, I guess, was true. We ended up talking for almost an hour that first night. About nothing, really. School, movies, how boring summer in small-town Ohio was. The next night she called again. This time, she didn't bother with a fake voice. "Hey, it's me, the terrible prank caller," she said. And just like that, it became a routine. Every night around 9 or 10 she'd call. Sometimes she'd have a new joke. Sometimes she'd just want to talk. We'd share music recommendations, vent about our parents, talk about crushes. Mine was a boy named Aaron, who barely knew I existed, and hers was a girl named Megan, who definitely didn't know she existed. It was the kind of friendship that only teenagers can have. Too honest, too open, and completely detached from real-world expectations. I didn't tell my parents about Lindsay at first. It felt like this secret world that belonged only to me. But one night my mom caught me whispering on the phone at midnight and freaked out. She thought I was talking to some older man. I had to put Lindsay on speaker to prove she was just a regular kid. My mom grilled her for 10 minutes before finally sighing and saying, "Well, at least you're not sneaking out." From then on, Lindsay would joke, "Hi, Mrs. Cooper." Every time she called just to mess with her, we eventually met in person. It took about 3 months of phone calls before we finally worked up the nerve. My parents were hesitant. "You met her over the phone? What if she's not who she says she is?" But Lindsay's mom, Diane, actually spoke to mine. and they agreed to meet at a neutral place, a diner halfway between our towns. I'll never forget seeing her for the first time. She was wearing this ridiculous bright yellow hoodie with cartoon cats all over it, her hair in 2 messy braids, and the biggest grin I'd ever seen. She waved both arms like she was trying to land a plane. I was so nervous I spilled my milkshake 5 minutes into our first face-to-face conversation. After that, we were inseparable. We spent weekends at each other's houses, made dumb YouTube videos lip-syncing to Paramore songs, prank-called other people together a full-circle moment, and built entire worlds out of inside jokes. My dad used to call us the Static Twins, because we were always either on the phone or blasting music through his old stereo. But what made Lindsay special wasn't just that she was funny. It was that she got me. At 14, I didn't feel understood by many people. I wasn't popular, didn't play sports, wasn't rebellious enough for the cool crowd, but Lindsay made me feel like being weird was a good thing. That our awkwardness, our late-night existential talks about growing up, our terrible prank calls all meant something. The summer before high school ended, she came out officially. She told her mom, her friends, and me that she was gay. I was the first person she told. Technically, she called me crying one night, scared she'd lose everyone. I remember saying, "If they can't love you for who you are, they don't deserve you." I didn't realize at the time how much that would mean to her. After graduation, we went to different colleges. Life pulled us in opposite directions. She studied art in Chicago. I stayed in Ohio for journalism school. We texted less, called sometimes. But adulthood has a way of shrinking the hours in your day. Then 3 years ago, she called me again, out of the blue. After almost a year of silence, guess what? She said, "I'm getting married." Her fiancé's name was Samantha, and she sounded like the kind of person who made Lindsay light up just by existing. She asked if I'd come to the wedding. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. At the reception, during the speeches, Lindsay stood up and told the story of her first prank call. She pointed at me across the room and said, "This girl picked up the phone and changed my whole life." Everyone laughed, but I started crying like an idiot. We still talk sometimes. Not every day like when we were kids, but enough. She lives in Oregon now, runs a small art studio with Samantha, and tonight, after months of missing each other's calls, we finally caught up again. She said, "You know, I was thinking, if I hadn't been a bored little gremlin with a flip phone, I'd never have found my best friend," I told her. "And if I hadn't answered that call, I'd probably still be taking life way too seriously." We both laughed. But after we hung up, I just sat there for a while, staring at my phone, thinking about how strange and beautiful it is. How something that started as a prank became one of the most genuine connections of my life. Sometimes the best things in life come from the weirdest beginnings. And sometimes your best friend just happens to be the stranger who asked if your refrigerator was running. Update. It's been a few years since I told the story about becoming best friends with my prank caller, and I honestly didn't expect it to get the kind of attention it did. When I first posted, I thought maybe a handful of people would find it funny or sweet. Instead, it got thousands of comments, messages, even people sharing their own random friendship stories. Lindsay thought it was hilarious when I told her, "Guess I've peaked," she said. My greatest achievement was cold calling someone at 14. But life being what it is, the story didn't end there. Lindsay and I always joked that our friendship would outlast anything. Time, distance, bad Wi-Fi, and for a long time that felt true. We talked a few times a year, sent birthday memes, FaceTimed occasionally when our schedules lined up. But last year, I got a call that changed things again. It was Samantha. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw her name pop up. We weren't close, but she'd only ever called me once before, to coordinate Lindsay's bachelorette party. When I answered, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry, but I thought you should know. Lindsay's in the hospital." She told me Lindsay had been in a car accident. A drunk driver had run a red light and hit her while she was driving home from the studio. She was alive, but hurt, broken ribs, a concussion, and a fractured leg. I think I said, "I'm on my way." Before I even processed what I was doing, I drove all night from Ohio to Oregon. 10 hours, 2 energy drinks, and a panic attack later, I was standing in a hospital hallway staring at my best friend lying in a bed surrounded by machines. She looked so small. When she saw me, though, she smiled. That same ridiculous grin she'd had the first time we met at the diner. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice hoarse. I laughed and cried at the same time. I sat by her bed, held her hand, and for a while we just Talked about nothing and everything, just like we used to. About her studio, about the art show she'd been planning, about how she hated hospital food. She said, I think I'm done driving for a while. I said, yeah, maybe stick to prank calls again? She laughed so hard she started coughing, and the nurse glared at me. She stayed in the hospital for almost a week, and I stayed in town the whole time. Samantha insisted I crash on their couch. Every morning, I'd bring coffee to Lindsay's room, and we'd sit, and people watch the nurses and make up stories about their lives. It felt like we were kids again, the same energy, the same stupid humor. One night, she got quiet. She said, I was thinking about how random everything is. If I hadn't called you that night, I don't even know who I'd be now. I told her the same thing I told her when we were teenagers. You'd still be you, just maybe a little less annoying. She laughed again. But then she said softer, no, really. You're my person, you know that, right? I didn't say anything for a second because my throat hurt too much. I just nodded. After she got discharged, I stayed a few extra days to help out while she recovered. Samantha went back to work, and Lindsay and I spent our afternoons on the porch, drinking lemonade, listening to old playlists we used to make for each other. She still had one of our mixed CDs from 2008, labeled Epic Summer Vibes in my awful handwriting. It was surreal. We were both in our 30s, with mortgages and jobs and responsibilities, but somehow the dynamic was exactly the same. On my last night there, she gave me a framed print, one of her art pieces. It was a simple drawing of an old-school cordless phone with the cord forming the outline of two girls laughing she'd written underneath it. Static twins, I cried when she handed it to me. She said, don't start, or I'll start. And then we were both a mess. Since then, we've made a pact, one that we've actually stuck to. Every month, no matter what, we have one phone call. No texting, no voice notes, an actual call. It doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes or 2 hours. We just talk. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we vent. Sometimes we sit in silence, but we show up. It's funny. People always talk about how friendships fade as you get older. And yeah, they do. But the good ones? The weird once-in-a-lifetime kind? They just change shape. A few weeks ago, Lindsay called me while she was walking to her studio. She said, I was thinking, what if I hadn't dialed your number that night? What if I'd called someone else? And I told her, then someone else would have gotten really lucky. She went quiet for a second, then said, yeah, but not as lucky as me. I don't know why, but that moment stuck with me. Maybe because it reminded me how fragile and random everything is. How one decision, one phone call, one small act of curiosity can change your whole life. The world's gotten louder since we were kids. Phones aren't magic anymore, they're constant noise. But sometimes when mine rings late at night, I still get that same little jolt of excitement I did at 14. Because sometimes it's still her on the other end of the line. And no matter how much time passes, the sound of her laugh still feels like home. Final update. It's been almost 5 years since my last update, and I honestly wasn't sure if I'd ever post here again. But life has this strange way of looping back on itself. Like no matter how far you go, certain people and memories always find their way home. A few months ago, I got another call from Samantha, but this time, it wasn't the kind of call anyone ever wants to get. Lindsay passed away in February, even writing that still doesn't feel real. She'd been fighting cancer quietly for over a year. Something only her wife and a few close family members knew about. She didn't tell me, not because she didn't trust me, but because she didn't want me to worry. I wanted to keep the phone calls light, Samantha said, her voice cracking on the other end of the line. I sat there in my kitchen, gripping the phone so tight my hand hurt, just listening as she told me what happened. The doctors had caught it late. Lindsay had been in and out of treatment for months, but in true Lindsay fashion, she kept working, kept painting, kept living like nothing could stop her. She passed peacefully at home, Samantha said. It was a quiet morning, sunlight pouring through the windows, a half-finished cup of tea on the table. I don't remember much after that. I think I just sat on the floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. Her funeral was in Oregon, and I flew out 2 days later. It was small, beautiful, and completely her. Her favorite records played softly in the background. Fleetwood Mac, Death Cab for Cutie, Joni Mitchell. Her paintings lined the walls, and people shared stories about her humor, her stubbornness, her laugh that filled a room. When it was my turn to speak, I almost couldn't do it. But then I thought about the first time she called me, how ridiculous it all was. A random number, a dumb prank, a lifetime friendship. So that's what I talked about. I told everyone how we met. How she turned a prank call into a real connection. How she taught me that laughter and kindness could cut through the static of anything. People laughed through their tears. Even Samantha smiled through hers. After the service, Samantha gave me something. It was a small, worn-out notebook. The kind Lindsay used to carry everywhere. On the first page, in her handwriting, it said, "To Emily, the first person I ever chose to call, and the last person I'll always want to talk to." There were little notes, doodles, half-written letters, some addressed to me, some just random thoughts she'd jotted down over the years. On one page she'd written, "If you're reading this, it means you picked up again. You always do. Thank you for always answering. I've never cried harder in my life when I got home." I hung the framed drawing she gave me, the one of the old phone with the words "Static Twins," above my desk. It's been there ever since. Some days, when I'm working or just zoning out, I catch myself staring at it and smiling. We used to joke that we'd still be prank calling each other in nursing homes one day. I wish we could have made it that far, but in a strange way, I feel like we still do. Like she's still somewhere, laughing, making jokes, breaking the quiet. I still have her number saved in my phone. I can't bring myself to delete it. Every once in a while, usually on bad days or quiet nights, I'll scroll through and just look at her contact photo. A blurry picture from her wedding, her eyes scrunched up mid-laugh, the night before her memorial. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. I called her number. I knew it wouldn't go through. Samantha had already shut off the phone, but it rang once before going to voicemail. Hearing her old voicemail greeting, her voice, chipper and teasing, broke something open in me. She used to say, "You know what to do." "Static Twin," I whispered. "Hey, it's me. I just wanted to say I miss you, and thank you for calling." Then I hung up. The thing about people like Lindsay is that they don't really leave. They leave echoes. I still find them everywhere. In stupid internet memes, in the smell of lemon tea, in every late-night phone call with someone I care about. She taught me how to find meaning in randomness. How to pick up the phone when life calls, even when it's unexpected. It's been months now, and I still catch myself thinking of something I want to tell her. A funny story, a song I think she'd love. And then I remember she already knows. So yeah, I guess this is the real final update. When I was 14, I answered a prank call that turned into the best friendship I ever had, 20 years later. I lost her, but I also realized something she'd probably find poetic. Even when the line goes dead, some connections never hang up. Stories number 12. My mom told me I was a practice kid. I always knew there was something different about the way my mom treated me compared to my younger siblings. I just never had a name for it until a few months ago, when she gave me one herself. Practice kid. The words sounded like a joke when she first said them, but they didn't land that way. I'm 27 now, and my mom, Linda, had me when she was 20. She was married to my dad, Greg, for about 7 years before they split. They had 2 more kids together. My sister Hannah, who's 23, and my brother Tyler, who's 20. Mom remarried when I was in high school to a guy named Rick, and they had a daughter, Emily, who's 11 now. I've always been the one who got the tough love. When I was a kid, Mom worked 2 jobs and was constantly stressed. I learned to do my own laundry by the time I was 9, cooked for myself most nights, and knew better than to ask for help with homework. When Hannah or Tyler needed something, she'd drop everything to help, but if I did, it was always, "Figure it out, you're older." I used to tell myself she was just stricter because I was the oldest. But as I got older, I started realizing it wasn't just that. It was emotional distance. She'd laugh and joke with the younger ones, but with me, everything felt formal. It wasn't until last Thanksgiving that things came to a head. Mom hosted dinner at her house, and it was the first time in years we were all together. It was mostly fine, until after dinner, when we were sitting around the table talking about childhood stories. Hannah brought up a time Mom helped her make a volcano for a science project, and everyone laughed. Then Tyler mentioned his baseball games and how Mom never missed one. I joked. "Guess I was the trial run. You had all the kinks worked out by the time you got to them." Everyone laughed except Mom. She said almost casually, "Well, you kind of were. You were my practice kid." I froze. Everyone laughed again, thinking she was kidding, but she just kept going. "I mean, I didn't know what I was doing back then. You were the one I messed up on so I could get it right with the others." The table went quiet. I could feel my chest tightening. I said, "You messed up on me?" She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, don't take it like that. Every parent has to learn somehow." But the way she said it, so blunt, so casual, hit me harder than I expected. I got up and excused myself, went outside, and just stood there in the cold air trying not to cry. Later, my dad found me sitting on the porch. He'd heard what she said, he sighed and said, "That sounds like something your mom would think is funny." But it's not. After that night, I couldn't shake the phrase, "Practice kid." It echoed in my head like an insult wrapped in an apology. I didn't talk to Mom for a few weeks. When I finally did, I told her that what she said hurt me. She seemed genuinely confused at first, like she didn't understand why I'd take offense. "Oh, honey," she said. "You know I didn't mean it like that. I was young, I didn't know what I was doing. You turned out fine, didn't you?" And that, "you turned out fine," was her way of brushing it off. I realized then that she'd never see it from my perspective. That to her, I was evidence of her growth. Proof she'd learned to be a better mom, for everyone else, after that. I started to remember all the small things that used to sting but I'd brushed aside, like when she used to say, "I did what I could with what I had." Or when she'd tell me I was so independent like it was a compliment, when really it meant I had no choice but to be. Hannah reached out later and told me she never realized how different things had been for me. She said, "Mom always told us you were strong, that you didn't need as much." That part really got me. Because that's what parents say when they justify neglect. They convince themselves the oldest one doesn't need what the others do. I've spent most of my life trying to be the good daughter. I graduated college, got a steady job, never asked her for help, but it's exhausting carrying the emotional weight of being the kid who had to raise herself while everyone else got to just be kids. It's funny. When she said "practice kid," I think she really believed it was a light-hearted way to acknowledge her early mistakes. But to me, it felt like confirmation. Like she finally admitted that my childhood was a test run. The thing is, I don't think she's a bad person. I think she was overwhelmed and young and trying her best with what she had. But I also think she never realized how much of that practice came at my expense. Lately, I've been in therapy, and my therapist said something that stuck with me. You can understand why someone hurt you and still acknowledge that it hurt. So that's what I've been trying to do. I can understand that my mom was figuring out how to be a parent. I can understand that she didn't mean to hurt me. But I can also acknowledge that being someone's practice kid leaves scars that don't go away easily. Last weekend, she called me to invite me to Emily's dance recital. I went, and I watched her cheering, filming, smiling so proudly, and for the first time, instead of feeling jealous or left out, I just felt distant, like I'd finally stopped waiting for her to parent me. After the recital, she hugged me and said, "I'm glad you came, sweetie," and I said, "Me too." But as we were leaving, she said, half laughing, "You see? I'm a much better mom now." I just smiled and said, "Yeah, you are, because there's no point fighting it anymore. I can't change the past. I can't make her see it the way I do. But I can stop trying to be the kid she finally gets right." It's been about 6 months since that Thanksgiving incident, and the phrase, "practice kid," still echoes in my head from time to time. But I think I'm finally starting to process what it really means for me, and how it shaped my life in ways I didn't fully understand until recently. After that holiday, I didn't talk to Mom. Linda, for a few weeks I needed space. I realized I had been carrying a mix of anger, sadness, and resentment for years, and it all came bubbling up when she said that one phrase aloud. My therapist, Dr. Sanders, told me that what I was feeling was completely valid, that what Mom had said wasn't just flippant. It tapped into a lifetime of subtle emotional neglect. Once I was ready, I called her. I expected the conversation to be tense, maybe even explosive, but it wasn't. I told her plainly how her words affected me, how being called a practice kid made me feel like my entire childhood had been secondary, like I was some kind of experiment she was refining for my siblings. She paused, and for the first time, I really heard silence on the other end. Then she said, I didn't realize it made you feel that way. I thought it was just a joke. I'm sorry. It was awkward. But it was the first time I felt like she acknowledged that my feelings mattered. Not as a reflection on her growth, but as my own experience. She wanted to explain herself, to justify why she said it. But I stopped her. I told her that I didn't need explanations. I needed recognition of what happened, and she did that. The weeks that followed were a delicate balancing act. I started noticing the little things that showed she was trying, even if imperfectly. She began checking in on me, not just asking how work was going, but how I was feeling. She even asked if I wanted to spend a weekend together, just the two of us, no siblings. No step-siblings, I agreed. We went to a cabin by the lake. Just the two of us, and it was strange at first. There was tension, the unspoken history between us buzzing in the air. But we started talking about our childhoods, not just the hard parts, but the memories she cherished, the ones she wished she'd done differently. And I started telling her about the times I'd felt overlooked, about how lonely I felt navigating childhood mostly on my own. She cried. I cried. We laughed awkwardly, in between tears. And for the first time, it felt like we were on the same side. Not parent and child in a hierarchy, but two people who had shared a life together and were finally being honest about it. I started noticing the patterns from my childhood in myself. The way I always felt responsible for others. The way I second-guessed asking for help. The way I kept my emotions contained. Dr. Sanders helped me see that these weren't just quirks. They were survival mechanisms. I learned to separate who I had to be to survive from who I could actually be now. Mom and I have been slowly rebuilding our relationship. She asks my opinion, genuinely listens, and doesn't immediately try to correct me. She's still imperfect, she's still blunt, still quick to make a joke that misses the mark. But now I can see it for what it is. A human trying, fumbling, learning along the way. I've also started connecting more with Hannah and Tyler about all this. Talking to them made me realize that Mom's parenting had been very different with them. Yes, but that's not necessarily their fault or mine. It was context, timing, energy, experience. Understanding that helps me not resent them, but instead focus on my own healing. Emily, my youngest half-sibling, also plays a role in this healing. I see now that part of why I've been so protective, so cautious, is that I don't want her to feel like she has to be a practice kid too. I actively try to make space for her to be herself without burdening her with the expectations I grew up carrying. And it's working. She laughs at my jokes, comes to me when she's frustrated, and sometimes even vents about her mom, Rick, or school. I try to meet her with patience instead of judgment. Because I know how it feels to have your feelings minimized. The phrase, practice kid, still stings, but it's lost its power over me. I've reframed it in my mind, not as a condemnation, but as a reflection of Mom's youth and inexperience. And while it's painful to acknowledge how it shaped my childhood, it's also helped me appreciate the ways I've grown stronger, more self-aware, and more resilient than I realized. Mom and I are still navigating this relationship, but for the first time, it feels like we're on equal footing. She can admit her mistakes, I can express my hurt, and we can both move forward without trying to erase the past. I don't know if our relationship will ever be perfect, and I'm okay with that. I just want it to be honest, and I think we're finally getting there. It's been almost a year since Mom called me her practice kid, and I've finally reached a point where I can really reflect on how much that moment changed everything between us. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever get here, where I could think about her words without my chest tightening, where I could see our relationship for what it is instead of what I wished it would be. Over the past year, Mom and I have spent a lot of time together, not just in the occasional holiday visit or a brief phone call, but real, intentional time. We started with small things. Lunch once a month, a weekend hike, sometimes just coffee at a quiet cafe. At first, the conversations were stilted. I'd talk about work, she'd tell stories about the past, and we'd both overthink everything we said. But over time, the tension softened. One of the turning points was when she invited me to help her organize her house. It sounds mundane, but it was huge. She asked me to sort through old photos, memorabilia, and keepsakes, stuff she hadn't touched in years. I found myself holding old pictures of me as a toddler, and instead of feeling hurt or angry, I felt a sense of curiosity about our life together. I asked her about the stories behind each photo, and she actually told me, fully and honestly, about the decisions she made, the things she regretted, the times she didn't know what to do. For the first time, I saw her not as mom who hurt me or practice parent, but as a person navigating life the best she could. We also started talking about my siblings. Hannah and Tyler had always seemed to have an easier relationship with her, and for years that had made me feel invisible. Now, though, I could see their interactions differently. They weren't perfect either, and Mom's way of parenting them wasn't perfect. But understanding that helped me stop comparing my childhood to theirs. I realized my experience wasn't worse, just different, and that difference didn't make me less worthy of love. Emily, my youngest sibling, became an unexpected bridge in this process. Because of my history, I've made a conscious effort to be present in her life without projecting my past onto her. That meant celebrating her achievements, listening when she's upset, and letting her be a kid, without the pressure I grew up with. Seeing Mom interact with Emily also helped me forgive her in small ways. Watching her cheer for Emily, guide her gently, and sometimes stumble and apologize openly reminded me that Mom had grown. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying. The biggest shift, though, came when Mom finally admitted that she had treated me differently, and that it wasn't fair. She didn't say it lightly. She didn't couch it in excuses, she said. "I know I handled things differently with you, and I see now how that hurt you. I wish I had done better." Hearing that, without any jokes or justifications, was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I cried, of course. I've cried a lot this year, but it was cleansing, not just sad. Since then, our relationship has changed. We talk more openly, argue less, and I feel comfortable expressing my feelings without fearing judgment. I've stopped expecting perfection from her, and I've stopped expecting her to see the world exactly as I do. Instead, we meet somewhere in the middle, learning how to navigate each other's perspectives. I've also been able to forgive myself for the lingering resentment I held. For years, I thought feeling hurt made me weak, that I should have toughed it out because she was my mom. Therapy and reflection have shown me that acknowledging that hurt doesn't make me less strong. It makes me human. We recently had a family gathering with all the siblings, including Emily, and it was the first time in a long while I felt fully present and connected. Mom laughed, we all teased each other, and no one had to tread lightly. I realized that this year of processing, talking, and reconnecting had created a foundation that could withstand the bumps in the road that family life inevitably brings. Looking back, I can see how the phrase "practice kid" was less about me and more about Mom's own journey. It stung, and it left scars. But it also forced me to confront years of unresolved feelings and to reclaim my narrative. I'm not just the kid she practiced on. I'm the daughter who survived, who grew, and who now has a voice in her relationship with her mother. Mom and I still have moments, awkward jokes, disagreements, reminders of our old dynamics, but they're different now. They don't define our relationship, they're just part of it, and for the first time, I feel like we're building something real, a connection based on honesty, understanding, and mutual respect. I don't know if I'll ever stop thinking about that phrase completely, but I no longer feel trapped by it. Instead, I feel empowered by it, because it led me to confront my past, communicate my feelings, and forge a stronger bond with my mom than I ever thought possible. We're not perfect. We never will be. But for the first time in my life, I feel like we're on the same team.